This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate 6th part of What If Naruto Was Betrayed by Leaf After Pain Attack. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Walking through the slightly frozen streets of Shimogakure with her best friend and partner, Shomei, she said, "I really hope that he won't come to look for us here." Arashi and Tamura, the two village brothers, were walking behind them. Shomei grinned and said, "If he does, oh well. Sure, this masked guy can take on one Biju, but let's see him take on two." Matabi nodded, satisfied. "Arashi, Tamura, your village is really cool." While his brother Arashi, who rarely speaks, merely nodded, Tamura sighed and said, "Yeah, I guess." Matabi looked back at the two brothers and said, "You know, there's one part of the village I haven't seen yet. The icicle forest. Can we go there?" Arashi glanced at his brother, and the two of them nodded. Tamura spoke for the two of them, saying, "Sure." After a short while, they emerged from the walls of the village and entered the surrounding snowy forest, walking through the village with the Akatsuki Tower towering over them. Their destination was the icicle forest, a well-known landmark in Shimo. Many people in the village had to go there for training, meditation, and time alone themselves because it was a very special and sacred place. The branches and leaves of the trees were covered in frozen icicles that hung from them, creating a sight that was both visually stunning and used as tools by the skilled ninja from Shimo to forge their frozen weapons. They trudged through the soft snow covering the ground for a few minutes before forcing their way through some branches and leaves and discovering an incredible sight. Shomei and Matabi stood motionless, taking in the entire site of the forest illuminated with tiny sparkles caused by the sun's reflection through the numerous icicles dangling from the tree's branches. "Whoa," with utter amazement, Shomei said, "This is beautiful." The entire scene was eye candy for the two Biju. When they were paired with the two Biju as their protectors, Arashi said, "Okay, we've been out of the village long enough. We need to get you back." Matabi crossed her arms and pouted, "Fine," as if she were a small child being told to do something she didn't want to. "I don't think I can allow that." The sight of a cloaked figure emerged from behind a tree, his face concealed by a porcelain mask with two tomo-shaped eyeholes and a yellow and black flame. Styled design startled all four of them and caused them to tense up. As he and his brother moved in front of Matabi and Shomei, the former brandishing a kunai and Tamura drawing his longsword, Arashi cursed, "Shit." The man raised his hands in a defensive gesture and said, "Already drawing the weapons on me? I haven't even explained my reasons for approaching you." His voice was a little deep. Arashi growled, "We already know why you're here," and Tamura sighed slightly in response to his brother's callousness. "Please excuse him. What he means to say is, we already know who you are and that you're here to capture Chomei and Matabi. Sorry to say, but it's not going to happen." "Oh really?" the man inquired, lowering his head to look directly at the two Biju, who gasped when they saw his eyes. The left eye turned out to be a Sharingan, which had already transformed into its Mangekyo Sharingan form. It resembled a two-bladed shuriken, similar to the Mangekyo of Itachi Uchiha. The right eye, known as the Rinnegan, is the most powerful of the three great dojutsu. It is a very rare and well-known eye. Matabi exclaimed, "The Sharingan? And the Rinnegan?" as the masked man giggled. The masked man kept laughing as Arashi tightened his grip on the kunai and said, "It doesn't matter. He's not going to get you too." "Keha. You really think you can stand up to an Otsutsuki?" he questioned, gestured to them with his own two kunai held backhanded. Shomei narrowed his eyes and said, "Indra. So it has been you all along. It was kind of a given anyway." Indra laughed once more. While the two brothers were closely observing Indra as he knelt down a bit, he said, "Keha. But of course. Though I've actually played a very minor role in what has been occurring as of now. As we speak. I believe my subordinates have not only obtained the Gobi from Iwagakure, but the scroll of the Crimson Moon as well." However, Matabi and Chomei were beginning to show signs of fear as they realized that their brother Kakuo had already been taken prisoner, leaving them and Naruto as the only remaining Biju. Matabi exclaimed, "No, you're lying," as Indra continued to laugh, sending shivers down their spines. "Oh, quite the opposite, Nibi. The Gobi was a tough fight, yes, but he, like all of you has fallen, and I have already absorbed him into my body. Now I only require you two and the Kyubi." "Not today, buddy," scowled Arashi as he removed his rebreather. Tamura's eyes widened as his brother made multiple hand seals and inhaled deeply. He growled, "Kaden. Goryuka no Jutsu," and shot a massive stream of fire that shaped itself into a fireball with a dragon's head that was aimed directly at Indra. The man quickly threw his kunai into the trees that surrounded them, disappearing next to one of the kunai that had become stuck in a tree while the attack had no effect on him. "Go ahead and try again, I dare you." Matabi questioned, "How did he move so fast?" Tamura narrowed his eyes, spotting something on the kunai Indra was waiting for. The other three were taken aback when he said, "It looks like his kunai have a formula imprinted on them related to the Flying Thunder God technique." Shomei questioned, "Flying Thunder God technique? Since when did Indra learn that?" As Indra's horrible snickering reverberated from behind his mask. "Since I brought this body back, of course," he uttered, and the four understood his meaning of body and back at once. "Permit me to introduce myself," Indra said before pulling back the hood to reveal a head full of unkempt blonde hair and, once the mask was removed, the emotionless and icy face of Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage and father of Naruto. Arashi growled, "You sick bastard." As Indra laughed once more through Minato's lips. Minato was completely under Indra's control. His reanimated corpse was just a puppet. "Not necessarily. I'm simply borrowing this body to help further my own goals, quickly." "In time for what?" Shomei wondered, or Minato's or Indra's smile grew larger. "The Red Dawn." "Red Dawn? What the hell is that?" "It's time to die. I've wasted too much time talking to you," Indra declared, then teleported to the other kunai in an instant, forming a medium-sized Rasengan in Miyato's hand and plunging it straight into Tamura's back. His body turned ice blue, but instead of absorbing the jutsu, freezing around his arm and trapping him there as the true Tamura appeared from the tops of the trees, his sword glowing white. He was confused. He dove directly down on Indra, severing him completely in two places as it passed through his shoulder and left his waist on the right side. With a kick, Indra abruptly knocked him back, causing several ash and paper fragments to fly out of his body before his skin instantly returned to its normal shape. Indra laughed, "It's useless to try and kill me. I have unlimited chakra and cannot be killed." Just as he was about to throw another kunai straight at Tamura's forehead, his sneer turned into a chilly scowl. Tamura did not dodge the kunai as he had anticipated. Instead, he blocked it with his sword and swung it back behind his head, muttering a jutsu as the blade began to glow once more. "Hayaten, Makadzuki Kama," he uttered as he lowered his sword and swung a sheet of ice shaped like a crescent moon, razor-edged, straight at Indra. He avoided the blow, but let out a grunt when Arashi materialized directly behind him, planting his foot squarely in the back of his skull. Tamura punched him in the stomach next, and both brothers immediately returned their elbows to his throat, knocking him back several yards and into a tree. "Hayaten. Kokuryu Bofusetsu. Kaden. Karyu Enden." Arashi blasted out a compressed stream of raging fire that flew side by side with Tamura's jutsu directly at Indra, while Tamura thrust his hand out and a giant black dragon, resembling ether, spontaneously formed and raced towards Indra from the icicles hanging from the surrounding trees. After the two jutsus made contact with one another, they exploded violently, sending a shockwave that tore through the forest and broke off the snow and ice from the nearby trees for 30 miles. As the steam from the two attacks started to dissipate, Matabi exclaimed, "Awesome! Now we just need to seal his body." However, her joy was short-lived as she noticed the outline of a large object behind the steam. As the steam cleared and the four Akatsuki members tensed at the sight of the dark red skeletal ribcage protecting him, Indra said, "Good try. Too bad it didn't work." Soon after, the arms and shoulder blades also began to form. "But please, entertain me more." Taiyo City, previous hours. After picking up the unconscious Naruto and bringing him back into the city so that Genkaku could get him medical attention, Noboru cleaned his hands of the blood that had come into contact with him. The injuries he sustained were so severe, even for a Biju, that if he had been a regular person, he would have passed away in the first 5 minutes after receiving them. When Genkaku shut the door to Naruto's room and sighed to himself, Noboru exclaimed, "Jesus! If Naruto was able to sustain injuries this bad, and that masked guy, Indra, only lost one of his arms and his clothes becoming a bit tattered, we may not be able to beat him at all." You might be right. Subsequently, Noboru had an idea and started to pace the room, causing Genkaku to raise an eyebrow in perplexity as he observed him moving from one end to the other. There actually might be a way that we could beat him. What? There is? Genkaku inquired. Yeah. In my clan. We held 3 prized possessions. One was the Raven's Claw Curse mark, another being the deadly genjutsu that some of our members use. The third, and most powerful of the 3, is an ancient weapon forged by our clan's ancestors during the Warring States period. It has the power to seal anyone into the weapon. Explained Noboru as he kept walking, his steps reverberating through the walls. Similar to a Tatsuka sword? Inquired Genkaku, while Noboru gave a slight nod. Noboru looked at Genkaku with a serious and sinister expression, and the latter became a little uneasy. Yes. It is known as the Kijin, the Demon Blade. It was in the possession of the oldest person in my clan, the one person I couldn't kill. He was known as the Lich. The Lich? The Lich was a man that was indulged in darker things, having been the one that had created the horrid Raven's Claw Curse mark, and also being the clan head as well. Why do you keep saying, he was? Noboru explained, his Genkaku stiffening at the mere notion, because the Lich is already dead. Or I should say undead. That's why I couldn't kill him. He's an Edo Tensei. An Edo Tensei? Who revived him? Anyway, I think we can beat Indra if I can get the Kijin. With it, all I have to do is stab Indra and he'll be sealed away into the weapon forever. Noboru said, reaching over to the table beside him and retrieving his twin swords. Slid them into the small strap holder slung over his shoulder while letting the chain connecting the 2 swords hang like it normally did. No one knows. He's been around ever since the term of the second Hokage, who created the jutsu that revived him. Noboru declared, I'm going to get Tsugakure. I'll be back as soon as I can. He then raised his hand in the tiger seal. Shortly after, his body split up into a swarm of crows that flew past Genkaku and appeared outside through an open window in the daylight. Present time. Getsugakure Noboru left the village on a different roof. Despite the fact that he was wearing the Akatsuki cloak and that one of their enormous towers was towering over it, the village didn't really welcome him because of what he had done all those years before. As he continued to search the village for the most likely location where the Lich would be hiding, he wondered, where are you? He pivoted his head and surveyed every building in the village, searching for a clue or a hint that would point him in the direction of his objective. Then he paused and fixed his gaze on a building that was marginally bigger than the others, shaped like a circle and with the moon perched directly overhead. Then he said to himself, the mausoleum. Of course. He took off from the roof he was standing on and shot through the air, landing soundlessly on the street across from the massive building. There was not a single person visible on either side of the road, everything was lifeless. Noboru thought to himself, good. I got here at the right time. No one is out and about, meaning I can just walk right. Aw shit. But then he heard footsteps coming and made a series of hand gestures. Having completed the seals, he stepped back and instantly blended into the shadows depicted on the wall behind him. He vanished from view as 2 shinobi strolled down the street, chatting to each other about something unrelated to Noboru. When they had left, he reappeared and approached the mausoleum's doors, grunting slightly as he forced open the thick oak doors. A cloud of dust hit his face and entered through his open mouth and nostrils, causing him to cough and wheeze. He squinted his eyes, trying to see through the empty darkness inside. The mausoleum was a historic structure that held great significance for the Getsugakure family. With its many tombs, it served as the final resting place for all of their greatest shinobi. They were unaware that the mausoleum was also the former residence of the Yamato clan, and that the only way to get to them was via a hidden passageway carved out of the old walls. Shikoku no Mi. Noboru muttered, his pupils turning pinkish red and his sclera turning completely black, creating a ghostly glow in the dark. He could see clearly now, the darkness no longer affecting him as he moved through the entrance hall, the circular chamber encircled by tombs, each of which contained a renowned shinobi from the village living in its stone chambers. On the other hand, Noboru approached one of the tombs and closed his eyes, letting out a deep sigh before setting out to find the Lich. He briskly made his way to the center of the building and looked down to see the clan's Raven's Claw symbol carved into the old stone. Father, he said softly, bowing towards the stone tomb that contained the shinobi. Noboru took a deep breath, held it for a short while, and then let it out. He then undid his cloak up to his waist, took off his right sleeve, and threw away his shirt, exposing a severely scarred body from the experiments his clan had subjected him to. The most terrible of all of them was a black mark etched on his lower neck. It was normally hidden by his shirt and cloak, but when they were removed, it was evident that he, and not his clanmate Horo, was the bearer of the Raven's Claw curse mark. "This is going to hurt. Release," he exclaimed as he formed the tiger seal. As soon as he released the seals he had applied to the curse mark, he instantly doubled over in agony. The symbol's influence spread throughout his body, starting from his neck and moving up his face, down his left arm and chest, to his waist, and finally down to his left leg. His skin turned a deep purple, nearly black, and the teeth on the left side of his jaw broke free from the inside of his mouth, growing out of and tearing through his lips to give him a more monstrous appearance. "Come on!" he cried out in anguish as the curse mark's power started to take over his mind and drive him insane. The mark itself also caused his chakra levels to rise. Subsequently, the black marks extended to the opposite side of his body, transforming his right side into the sinister appearance of his left side. This stripped him of his humanity and transformed him into a monster, a shadow of his former self. "I won't let you win," roared Noboru as he collapsed onto his back and applied pressure to the curse mark on his neck. Steam spurted from his skin, severely burning it, causing him to howl and curse in excruciating pain as the seal burned its image onto the palm of his hand. "Seal!" he exclaimed, and in an instant the pain went from being a deep purple to a brilliant white. The darkness from his skin disappeared, and his features returned to normal as the seal moved from his neck to the palm of his hand. Noboru lay there taking deep breaths, his body going limp, sweat trickling down his brow. When he raised his hand and saw the curse mark, he smiled. The mark had been burned onto his hand, flipping its image, but more significantly, Noboru had defeated its effects and taken control of it, rather than the mark controlling him. The White Raven's Claw. A symbol of nobility and having conquered the darkness of one's being. A full-fledged member of the Yamato clan, relief reading Noboru. He got up off the ground, bent over the clan's symbol that was etched into the stone, and pressed the curse mark against it. A bright light appeared around him, and as each step descended into place, a spiral stone staircase that descended into the ground beneath the mausoleum was revealed. After taking a few more deep breaths, Noboru composed himself before descending into the shadowy passageways of the catacombs beneath the mausoleum, which housed the Yamato clan. Being a true member of the clan and possessing the purified Raven's Claw, he had never set foot on these hallowed grounds. The first light he had seen since the village outside was a torch, and he blinked at it, deactivating the Raven's eyes as he descended farther and deeper into the ground with it. His face hardened at the sight of all the bones scattered across the floor, human bones, as his feet descended onto the last step and he studied the catacombs in front of him. Muscles clenching at the sight of every person he killed in cold blood, he blinked and staggered backward as memories of the massacre he caused overcame him. The voice was dark and said, "I know why you are here." The man was walking through the catacombs aimlessly, his terrible memories haunting him all the time. As the memories became more violent, he spat out several drops of blood. In one, he was seen chopping out a man's heart. In another, he was impaled with swords through the chest and throat. "Come to me, my son." The torch fell out of his hands, putting out the flames and sending him into complete darkness as he made his way farther into the catacombs. The smell of the bodies lying around on the ground, their flesh still decaying from being underground, was horrifying. Noboru opened his eyes to find blood streaming from his mouth. He froze, feeling as though the bodies had come to life and were trying to pull him down to the hell he had sent them to. Noboru cried out, "No! No! No!" as they scrambled over him and pulled him down into the decaying earth below, filling his throat with dirt and clogging his lungs with the stench of death. The terrifying images abruptly vanished, and he realized that the whole experience had been a dream because he was still at the base of the staircase in front of the catacombs. He followed an orange light that came from one of the many hallways all the way to the source, which was a circular room with a small fire burning in it and a shadowy figure sitting in front of it with his back to him. "So, you've finally arrived, Noboru." His fists tightening, Noboru gazed down at the one man he had failed to kill in his attempt to wipe out his clan, saying, "The Lich. So this is where you've been all these years." With a hiss. With a gruff, aged voice tinged with death, the Lich uttered, "Yes. And I have been waiting for you to finally come and find me once again. I know why you are here." "And why am I here?" Noboru asked, squinting his eyes. Noboru clenched his teeth a little before relaxing his hands. You come for the demon sword. The Kijin. There is great evil out and about, and you wish to use the sword to vanquish it. Am I correct? The Lich asked. Yes. Your wisdom is still far beyond most. Yes, the Lich said, and then he rose from his seat. His long black cloak concealed his feet, his hands were hidden by the sleeves, and the majority of his head was covered by the large hood. He turned to face Noboru, whose scowl grew as he saw the Lich for the second time in his life, who had the same features as before. Because the Lich was a reincarnated shinobi, his face was riddled with cracks and imperfections. His pupils were a pale blue color, and his sclerae were completely black. He had the appearance of a hermit because of his dark brown hair, which hung around his shoulders like an untidy mop. His face was the most unnerving thing about him, though. His mouth was stitched shut in 3 places, and his Glasgow smile stretched to the furthest corners of his cheeks. All things considered, he looked like a true Lich, an undead creature. With an eyebrow raised, he asked, So, now you expect me to give you the Kijin, right? Noboru reached up to the hilts of his 2 swords and brought them down to give them to him. The Lich's expression darkened and he slowly shook his head. Yes, I need to save a friend of mine. I will give you the other swords made for me in exchange for it, he answered. Before I give you the Kijin, I must know that you are worthy of wielding it. Show me. With his swords down, Noboru extended his right hand to the Lich, and the man's eyes glowed when he saw the cleansed curse mark on his hand. He nodded, closed his eyes, and then brought his palms together, using his chakra to cause the flames from the fire behind him to swirl around him before solidifying into an odd blade with a handle integrated into it and an attachment that resembled a gauntlet that an arm could fit through. The Lich accepted Noboru's blades and handed him the fabled sword, saying, This is the Kijin, a blade that can seal anything within it with a single stroke. Even the undead. His arm fit into the hilt and his hand wrapped around the handlebar within it. The blade itself was as big as a regular-sized sword. The Lich said, Press down on the handle. Noboru looked down at the blade and did as instructed, gasping. It was a terrifying weapon with 2 long, curved blades that spread apart from the center blade to form a 3-pronged blade that could tear through flesh that it had already pierced. The Lich turned back to face the fire, making the fatal error of saying, You have your weapon, now leave my presence. Not quite yet, the Lich snarled and gasped as the Kijin's blade protruded from the middle of his chest, being wielded by a sly Noboru who was standing behind him. You bastard, Noboru spoke with a dark and twisted sense of humor. Now that I have this blade, I can finish what I started, with killing off my entire clan for what they did me. The Lich's face twisted as his reincarnated body started to become sealed within the blade, the kanji engraved on it glowing bright red. Before his body crumbled and his soul sealed inside the sword, the Lich said, Very well. I guess this is justice, and the ashes of his former body disappeared into thin air. Once more, Noboru scoffed as he lowered the Kijin and took up his swords, putting them back where they belonged while holding the Kijin in his hand. He vanished from the catacombs and resurfaced outside Getsugakure amidst a flurry of crows, saying goodbye to the village for good before departing it one final time. Shimogakure. Icicle Forest Indra stood inside the fully activated Susanoo he had given Minato from the Mangekyo Sharingan, asking in a playful manner, Come now. Is this all you've got? His Rinnegan had allowed him to essentially neutralize any other attack directed at him. The only distinguishing feature of the Susanoo he had been given was that it had 4 arms instead of any kind of weaponry, which actually worked to its advantage. Through some mysterious means, Indra was able to channel Minato's chakra through the ethereal creature, allowing it to form his jutsu, including the Rasengan and the Flying Thunder God technique. The 2 Biju were forced into the fight after a Susanoo entered the fray, and they gave it everything they had in an attempt to defeat Indra, but it wasn't working. The 4 Akatsuki members, however, were nearly out of breath. Tamura and Arashi had taken the brunt of the beating while attempting to protect Matabi and Chome. Chome spit out her saliva and cracked her knuckles, saying, Arashi, Tamura, we're going to have to go into our true forms. These human forms aren't getting the job done. Matabi gave a small smile. With his left sleeve hanging limp at his side, Tamura swung his sword around and said, Right. We'll support you. There was only 1 arm left for him after his robotic arm on that side was severed. Arashi, however, had lost half of his shirt and cloak, but fortunately the bandages that had been wrapped around his body to protect it from flames and heat remained in place. Matabi exclaimed, "Come on, Chomei," as her chakra erupted around her, with Chomei trailing closely behind. "We're gonna roast his ass," Tamura said. "Let's make some cover, and then executed a series of hand gestures. "Hayaten. Soryu Bofusetsu," he exclaimed, and then the snow surrounding them shot skyward, transforming into a furious tornado that soon turned dark and solidified into two enormous black dragons with brilliant red eyes. They slithered through the atmosphere, merging into an enormous tornado of ferocious wind and snow that slammed into Indra, propelling him into its core and hurling him around like a ragdoll, with pieces of the Susanoo he was inside being torn away. Indra let the vortex fling him around for a few more seconds before it dissipated, sending him falling to the ground like a rock, smashing into the snow and sending it up in a giant plume. This has enough power to make dents in even Susanoo's skin. Very good, he thought to himself. Minato's Susanoo was reduced to a skeleton due to the vortex, and Indra laughed as he pulled himself up from the snow. Very good, please, keep it coming. When Minato saw the enormous tailed beast ball that Matabi and Chomei had created, hovering above their gaping maws and Arashi and Tamura securely behind them, his smile vanished from his face. Then he narrowed his eyes and saw something that caused his smile to come back, so he just let them pass. Matabi yelled, "Let it rip, Chomei," as the two Biju threw their heads back and hurled the enormous ball of chakra directly at Indra. "Right into my hands," he said to himself just before the enormous ball engulfed him and exploded, covering a great deal of land and trees and lighting up the sky with brilliant reds and yellows. It lasted only a few brief seconds before it vanished, revealing the icicle forest, a blackened and scarred crater inhabited by the giant forms of Chomei and Matabi watching it for any indication of their enemy. "I believe we have him," Chomei remarked as she flew over the area, Matabi squatting to peer at the ground and determine whether Indra had survived. She exclaimed, "Yeah, I think so too. Awesome," as the two transformed back into humans and gave each other a high five. "So, Indra's..." Abruptly, a hand landed on his shoulder, and he was whirled around in an instant, his eyes expanding as the Indra created a Rasengan in Minato's hand and stabbed it straight through his upper chest, the wildly spinning ball of chakra tearing away his flesh and cloak to leave a death-defying, bloody crater. "No!" exclaimed Arashi as he drew his kunai and lunged towards Indra. However, Indra was too quick and absorbed the blow, causing his fist to strike him in the stomach. This caused Indra to roll away, revealing his ribcage, arm, and hand surrounding him. He appeared in front of Matabi and Chomei in an instant, grabbed their throats, held them aloft, and took pleasure in watching as they struggled in vain. "You two gave me a very entertaining fight, I admit, but I must continue on with the Eye of the Moon plan. You understand, right?" Indra questioned, just before Arashi reappeared behind him with the kunai raised and prepared to fall on him. Abruptly, a foot struck the side of his head, knocking him unconscious. As his body collapsed to the floor, it became clear that the foot belonged to the masked man. He sighed and said, "Ah Shimo, such a wonderful place to be in this time of year." Chomei and Matabi gasped in horror as Minato slowly absorbed them, sending their chakra directly to Indra. "Well, it was nice of you to pop on in. Did you go and help out with the capture of the Gobi before coming here, I presume?" "But of course." Menma looked up at the two captive Biju, his name and his red eyes revealing his identity, and Indra sneered, "Well done. It was right of me to make you my partner, Menma." Menma laughed at Matabi's denial. "No, it can't be." With a slight snarl at his treachery, Chomei said, "Sorry, but it is all true. After everything your father did to bring peace to this world, you go and join him, Indra." Menma laughed again, leaving Chomei and Matabi speechless and with only one choice left. "My father. Sorry, but I don't know who he is. After Indra absorbs you too. All that's left is the Kyuubi." Menma crossed his arms and stared at Indra as he lowered his hands and said, "The eternal dream shall become a reality. Farewell." "Now what?" "Now. We intrude on an eventual meeting that will take place concerning our actions. It's time we make our plan known." 3 days later, Taiyo City. "What are we going to do, now that the other Biju have been captured?" "I don't have the slightest idea. All we have left now is Naruto. We should barricade the city and protect Naruto. He is too valuable of an asset to be lost. Even then, we don't know what Indra plans to do." The remaining cage, gathered in the boardroom directly beneath Naruto's penthouse, were still arguing among themselves. Naruto groaned slightly in frustration, then slammed his fist onto the table, causing the cage to fall silent. Naruto grinned and said, "Bickering among ourselves won't do us any good. We wouldn't want it to end up like the last cage meeting, before he calmed down and settled back into his chair, with the now recovery Darui keeping watch behind him. Gaara was not at the meeting, so Temari took Gaara's place at the table, her brother Kankuro sitting next to him with her fan leaning against the wall. Mei was seated closest to A, with Ao and Chojuro, her other swordsmen, serving as her dependable bodyguards, behind her. With a serious expression, Onoki questioned, "What do you suggest, since you are the one that Indra is after?" Naruto sighed and scratched his chin a little. "I agree with not leaving the walls of the city, but you all don't have to risk your lives to protect me," Temari said, her voice tinged with sadness, "but it's the only thing we can do. Gaara would have wanted to do this too." Trying to console his sister, who was still grieving for Gaara, Kankuro put his hand in her shoulder and gave her a gentle squeeze. "I believe I have a say in this discussion as well." The moment Indra materialized in the room, peering at the cages and their bodyguards from behind his mask, everyone in the room was on edge. "Indra!" tongued Naruto before the masked man emerged from behind Indra and stood with his arms crossed next to him. "What are you doing here?" asked A, and Indra answered directly, dismissing the subliminal threat in his voice. "I'm here to make a proposition, one that could potentially save your lives." "Which is?" inquired Onoki as Indra peered at them and, in a grave tone, revealed to them a revelation they had assumed would never come again. "The Eye of the Moon Plan." There was silence in the room as Indra revealed the name of his scheme, the same scheme that, years ago, nearly led them into the Fourth Shinobi World War due to Obito. Naruto growled, "That's why you've been nabbing all the Biju. For that horrid plan for false peace." The masked man gave him a glare and snarled back. "It is unwise to speak like that, Kyuubi." Indra comforted his fellow countryman, the masked man, who was growling once more before going silent once more. "Calm yourself, we are merely here to talk." Mei and the others raised their eyebrows in anticipation as Indra said, "As I was saying, I have a proposition for all of you." Everyone then watched as Indra raised his hand and pointed straight at Naruto. With a chilling demeanor, Indra declared, "Hand over the Kyuubi to me, and I won't consider allowing my colleague here to destroy your respective villages and this entire city." Naruto's heart was pounding so hard that his chest hurt. While the other cage remained silent, Kankuro stammered, "All of the villages." Suzaku, along with Naoshi and the other Akatsuki, barked, "You're insane if you think we're going to hand over Naruto." Noboru, on the other hand, was glaring at Indra and the masked man as he tightened his hold on the Kijin. The masked man glared at everyone, causing Naruto's jaw to tighten and the room to go silent. "Are you sure? You must reconsider when I tell you the severity of what he meant. I will kill every man, woman, and child in all of the villages before wiping them out on the face of the earth, leaving nothing left. Thousands upon thousands will die because you would rather protect one person." With complete seriousness in her voice, Mei said, getting up from the table to face Naruto, "We're willing to take that chance." Indra shook his head slowly as the other cage joined her and they all, along with their bodyguards and the Akatsuki members, formed a wall in front of Naruto. The masked man was by himself in the room with Indra when he said, "Very well. It must come to this. Enjoy the grief of having your villages destroyed." His finger and gaze pierced Naruto's very soul as he slowly raised his hand and pointed directly at him. Before disappearing from the room, leaving a sense of dread in his wake, he said, "I'm coming for you, Kyuubi." With the other cage following closely behind, I took command right away. "Okay, we're gonna have a lot of work ahead of us if we want to prepare against their attack. Come on, let's get to it." It was almost time to unleash all of hell, and it's not going to be pretty. After Indra and the masked man revealed their scheme to Akatsuki and the cages just 3 days ago, Taiyo City had changed from a thriving metropolis to a fortress with heavily armed defenders. With their cage leading them by their side, the other villages' walls were sealed and their finest fighters keeping them safe. Naruto watched the members of the private security force of Akatsuki Corporation finish fortifying the city, while the tower was outfitted with traps, ambush spots, and other devices they could come up with. He sighed to himself, wondering how things had come to this. He thought of a Megacure who had lost their cage, and he had lost a valuable friend and ally. Naruto. He spun around to see Akiyuri peek inside his penthouse after opening the door, followed by Suzaku, who shared her worried expression. He said, "It's okay, come on in," and then he turned to face the city through the windows, with Suzaku and Akiyuri at his side. Naruto sighed slightly at Suzaku's words, "We're with you on this, Naruto, all of us. We would all lay down our lives for you if we had to." He moved closer to Akiyuri and said, "I value your conviction, but I hope it doesn't have to come to that." Seeing that she was shivering a little at what was about to happen, he looked down at her and gave her a tight embrace, choosing to say nothing. He stood silently beside her and Suzaku, the three of them taking in the brief quiet before the storm. The graveyard at Mountain Menma removed his old mask and covered his face with a new one that had the same exterior as the previous one but longer ears and a tougher, more combat ready material. The mask was named Kitsune. He asked, smirking a little, "Indra, can I borrow your ganbai?" Before he undid the cuff that was holding the chain that connected the ganbai's hilt to his wrist. He gave it to Menma, who took care to keep the blade at the end away from him before slinging the war fan over his shoulder and clasping it onto his left wrist. Menma looked at Indra and said, "So, where will you be in all of this? And where's Horo?" The man laughed and moved to walk next to Menma, forming a seal. Before Nagato, Yahiko, the Preta Path, and Minato joined him as his aide, all four of them still lacking their distinct personalities. He said, "I'll be waiting for you at Taiyo City with the rest. If you get into any trouble, I'll be there." Menma nodded and said, "Very well. I'll meet you there." With that, he disappeared, leaving Indra and the shinobi he controlled to travel to Taiyo City and wait for him. Taiyo City, with residents being evacuated to shelters beneath buildings and city forces policing the streets and walls above, the entire city was placed under lockdown. This time, Naruto was sitting on the roof of the Akatsuki Tower, his legs hanging over the edge of the enormous structure, instead of in his office. The fields surrounding the city were completely covered in darkness at night, making it the ideal time for a covert attack. Suddenly, a number of enormous light pillars emerged from the horizon, illuminating the sky in a dazzling array of hues. The Akatsuki Tower trembled as the ground trembled violently and the shockwave from each struck the city like a brick, smashing through multiple windows. With a grim and dreadful expression, Naruto shot up from his seat and counted the pillars. A total of 7 existed, one for each village that had defied Indra. Getsu, Kusa, Suna, Aim, Kiri, Iwa, and Kumo. With his eyes fixed on the 7 pillars of light, Naruto felt an overwhelming sadness wash over him. He clutched his chest and lost all feeling in his legs, forcing his knees to the ground. "It has started," Suzaku remarked somberly as he stood next to Naoshi and Genkaku on the wall. The other members of the Akatsuki group were dispersed throughout the village along with the remaining defenders of the city. With Arashi standing next to him, but without his brother Tamura, Noboru said through his ear microphone, "Yeah, it was nice being with you guys." They had shrunk from 17 members since the start of this whole ordeal to just 8. Nevertheless, they were determined to fight to the death to keep their leader safe from Indra and the masked man. The city's forces scrambled to prepare for an impending attack as Suzaku's booming voice resounded throughout. "Get ready. The enemy will be upon us any moment now." 2 figures were sitting in the shadows in the surrounding forests of the village, one calling forth multiple caskets containing their reinforcements. "Begin." Suzaku, Naoshi, and Genkaku were the first to notice the masked man as he emerged from the trees and walked idly toward the city's tall walls. Suzaku didn't say anything else as he moved to the top of the wall and made the tiger seal while a liquid of some kind filled his cheeks. Screaming, "Yotan! Kazan Soso Hikei!" He unleashed a torrent of burning hot magma from his cheeks that smashed across the grassland below, reducing everything it came into contact with to ash and traveling straight to the masked man. Suzaku smirked as the wave struck the masked man, completely engulfing him, but he hesitated as the magma piled up onto itself to form a 50-foot tall tidal wave of pure destruction. "Rasenringu!" Suzaku sputtered, "What?" as the masked man materialized in the air above the now solidifying magma, his target the city's front gates, with a spiraling ring already formed. "Off the wall!" he exclaimed, and the masked man launched the jutsu directly at the iron wall, sending several bodies hurtling out of it as the jutsu completely destroyed it with a swirling dome of chakra that consumed everything inside of it, even down to the minuscule level. After landing in front of the wall, the masked man raised his head and gave Naruto a direct stare while he was using the Akatsuki power. He then pointed upward as though to indicate, "I'm coming for you." He turned away from him, then created the tiger seal, his hair standing on end, his tattered cape fluting up into the air, and a dark red chakra beginning to radiate from his skin. "Kumonju," he exclaimed, as his own mandala symbol appeared above him. Each ring of the symbol contained a distinct kanji. He chanted, "Ku, Gen, Sei, Byaku, Shu, Han, San, Hoku, Gyoku." As each kanji began to glow bright red as its significance was pronounced, except for the final one, which caused the entire thing to glow bright red and the kanjis to shimmer. The first appeared as a large golden, scaled serpent, then as a black tortoise with overlapping scales, then as a dragon resembling a seahorse, as a white tiger with black stripes, as a large bird with majestic red feathers, as a sage holding a wooden fox staff, as a humanoid skeleton wrapped in a tattered black cloak, as another sage that resembled its predecessor, and lastly as an elegant woman with translucent ribbons round her arms. Menma chose to take a leisurely stroll in the direction of the Akatsuki Tower, while the 9 masked beasts dispersed throughout the city to attack anyone they came across, following his command to go. One of the city's guardians exclaimed, "The wall's been breached. Multiple enemies inside the city." Just before the tiger, one of the masked beasts, mercilessly killed him. The tiger ducked down and started stalking Suzaku as he glanced at it and narrowed his eyes. The two circled each other, their gazes never leaving each other's. The masked beasts followed suit, pursuing each other and eliminating anyone who stood in their way. This also applied to the other Akatsuki members. By this time, the masked man had arrived at the Akatsuki Tower and was able to barely make out the figure standing at its edge as he peered upward towards the roof. After a brief moment of kneeling, he jumped up, grabbing hold of the gunbai he was carrying and tossing it in front of him, using its weight to propel himself upward even more quickly. When a bladed gunbai emerged from over the edge and grappled onto it, pulling up the man he did not want to see, Naruto leapt away from the edge, looking out in fear at the several columns of smoke rising from the city streets. With a fierce expression on his face, he held his gunbai tightly and pointed the blade at Naruto, watching the man's eyes through the mask. "Kyuubi. We meet again," he uttered. Naruto grunted a little as the pain in his stomach returned, exactly like it did during their first fight, and the two began to walk in a slow circle, his hands starting to perspire with fear as he watched the man in front of him for anything he might pull. He knew the masked man must have felt the pain as well because he saw him wince a little as he clutched his stomach. "Who are you? And why are you doing this? Indra is not the man to be allied with." The masked man spoke with such hate in his voice that Naruto shuddered a little. "Still wondering who I am, are we? I'd prefer if you would stop asking me such stupid questions. I am no one, and I want to be no one. All that matters now is capturing you and completing the Eye of the Moon plan. You sound exactly like Uchiha Obito. Or Madara, if I may? Tobi. Indeed, I am aware. Since Indra saved me and Madara Uchiha saved him, you could say that I am his reincarnation. Interesting, isn't it?" They kept moving in a circle as the masked man spoke. "This is not something you will win. Not at all." With his teeth bared, the masked man growled at Naruto, "I'm going to kill you where you stand." The latter cackled in response. "Oh my goodness. The other Biju told me that before I caught them. Although the Ichibi, Nibi, Nanabi, and others came close, they ultimately lost." Naruto growled, "I'm gonna rip that damn mask right off your face and sock you in the mouth." The masked man cackled again in response. The masked man challenged Naruto, saying, "If you want to take off this mask, you're gonna have to kill me first." With his ganbai swung directly at Naruto's neck. With a quick dodge, he slid to the right and raised his hand to the masked man, shouting, "Kaijiten! Akai Akuma Ryuho!" Suzaku heard the blast and looked up at the tower, swearing, as the jutsu blew off a portion of the large tower's roof, sending a loud boom across the entire city. Naruto, damn it! He swore and forced his focus back to the masked tiger he was fighting before ducking under one of its swipes. In order to assist Naruto, I must win this battle, as he wrapped his fire blade around his arm and swung it at the tiger, causing it to momentarily back off, he thought. After standing up, Naruto waited a few seconds for the masked man to emerge from the cloud of smoke left behind by the explosion. Then, the masked man attacked, swinging his ganbai around and trying to sever his stomach with the blade on it. Naruto ducked under a downward cut from him and retreated as the pain in his stomach increased, which allowed the masked man to swing the ganbai back around, cut him across the cheek, and then kick him in the stomach. Oh my god! With a curse, he attempted to stand again but gasped and collapsed to his knees, losing consciousness due to the blow to the head. Stand up. Go on. Kyuubi, fight me, the masked man growled as he slammed his foot against the roof. Immediately after, a root appeared from under his foot, slithered through the concrete roof, and helped Naruto stand again by pulling him up from behind. With his chakra starting to spiral out of control, Naruto wiped the blood from the cut on his cheek and snarled once more, the masked man sneering behind his mask as his rage grew. Come on, demonstrate the Kyuubi's power for me, he laughed and said, Naruto's fangs getting longer as he started to change into his version 1 form, his dark red chakra forming a bubbling exterior resembling a fox. Greetings, Rasengan. With a roar, he rushed the masked man while forming a violently rotating red ball in his hand. The war fan held its own for a few seconds before Naruto snarled again and pushed his hand in the ball through the ganbai, breaking it in two and sending the Rasengan into the masked man's right shoulder, where it tore up the skin and sent blood flying out in all directions as the chakra ball tore up the nerves, muscles, and even the bone in his arm until ultimately he separated it completely from his shoulder. He hesitated a second before bringing up the ganbai to block the attack, but he grunted when the force of the Rasengan struck its surface, pushing him back several feet. Motherfucking hell! His severed arm struck the roof with a sickening smack, and he stumbled back, clutching his bloody shoulder. Naruto grinned evilly as the blood that splattered onto him turned to steam and his skin peeled away, exposing his version 2 state beneath. Want to get the Kyuubi? I'll give you the Kyuubi. The masked man cursed to himself once more as he healed the wound and used the multiple root cell growth technique to grow back his arm. Naruto growled as he dropped to all fours and his third tail appeared. Half of his face had vanished and was replaced by the demonic chakra of his version 2 state. All right, bring it, I challenge you, he said, forming 2 spiraling rings with both hands as several wooden branches protruded from his shoulder and back like spikes. Rasen Shuriken. Screaming, Naruto used his 3 tails to form a crimson-red chakra shuriken, which he then threw at the masked man, who retaliated with a spiraling ring. The 2 strikes linked together and, as before, ground against each other until, at last, they erupted into a massive ball of chakra fire that once more destroyed a portion of the Akatsuki Tower. As the chakra overtook him and Naruto, the masked man held his hand to his mask. Naruto's version 1 state had completely changed into his 4-tailed version 2 mode, with his humanity now gone and replaced with pure bestial savare. The masked man was left bare-chested and wearing only pants. You'll pay for the harm you caused to the other Biju, I'll kill you for what you did to Yahiko, Gaara, and Killer Bee. Raging, Naruto roared before he was gone in an instant, the masked man glancing around for a brief moment before Naruto's fist struck his mask's cheek, sending him hurtling backward and colliding with one of the other buildings below, raising a cloud of smoke and flames in the process. When he felt the web of cracks across the cheek of his mask, the masked man cursed to himself and pulled himself out of a pile of rubble, but he was also relieved that the fight was only short-lived. In an instant, the furious Naruto attacked him once more with a barrage of kicks and swipes, his claws penetrating deeply into his flesh and leaving deep wounds that he promptly healed, only making Naruto more hostile as time went on. After kicking Naruto back, the masked man formed a big wooden stake in his hand. Consume this! He screamed as he drove the stake into Naruto's shoulder and then shoved himself away from him. Naruto screamed in pain as several big wooden branches burst out of his body in different places, forcing him to take a moment to rest and assess his wounds. Naruto growled once more, and the masked man swallowed hard as he witnessed the wooden branches erupt into flames and eventually turn to dust. The ground began to tremble slightly as Naruto's power increased and his wounds nearly healed in a matter of seconds. Noboru noticed a sharp rise in chakra nearby and swallowed slightly when she realized how much and whose it was. Before resuming his battle with the golden, scaled, masked serpent, he thought, "Please be careful, Naruto." Now that he was watching the masked man back away from him gradually, Naruto was stalking him and pacing back and forth while attempting to come up with a mental plan. He heals quickly, which is similar to me, most likely because he is a Biju. It's not helping that I have a pit in my stomach either. With a hint of deja vu, he thought, I'm also getting this feeling that I knew him once, but he pushed the thought aside and concentrated on attempting to incapacitate him. He barely had time to react before Naruto attacked him once more, sending him flying through the air and striking him in the jaw. Holding a Rasengan, he then met him there and struck him directly in the spine, breaking apart the wood clone into splinters instead of bone. Naruto hesitated a moment before turning around in midair and being struck in the chest by a massive mass of sharpened tree branches that overpowered him and pierced his body multiple times. The masked man grinned and exclaimed, "Gotcha!" He had been watching Naruto's body strike the building's roof and the wooden branches fall into the concrete all around him, trapping him like a spiderweb. He severed his arm from the branch of the tree and fell back to earth, gently alighting on the Akatsuki Tower's roof where he saw Naruto's body beneath the pile of wood. His eyes widened in shock as he said, "Seems I win again," with a smirk before the Naruto beneath the wood vanished in a puff of smoke. What the heck? He turned around in response to the overwhelming chakra presence behind him and was startled to see Naruto, who was not even in his version 2 form, rushing toward him while holding a Rasengan. "Oh my god! Hello!" cried Naruto, slamming the Rasengan squarely into his mask, breaking it into pieces and sending him flying back, his body rolling over and over on the ground a few times before coming to a stop close to the building's edge. The masked man slowly got to his hands and knees, his black hair concealing his face for a few moments before he used one of his hands to hide his face as he stood up, Naruto noticing that he wore a headband around his forehead. Naruto waited, the suspense overwhelming in every way, to see who would be revealed behind that mask. So I suppose it's about time the mask was taken off, huh? The only parts of his face that Naruto could see were his eyes and a small portion of his headband, as he laughed and slowly raised his head to address him. It sufficed. The man lowered his hand away from his mask, revealing bestial whisker, like birthmarks and a fanged, confident yet cocky grin that made Naruto shudder and widen his eyes in shock and despair at who the man in front of him really was. His headband held the slashed symbol of a megacure, and his eyes were the slit, dark red eyes of a fox. Ones he had known since he first laid eyes on them. "Menma, is that really you?" As his own son clenched his fists and kept grinning at him, Naruto stammered in shock. Then his smile vanished, to be replaced by a sour scowl that was clearly filled with hate. "Menma, how are you familiar with my name, Kyuubi?" "I'm a little confused," he asked, surprising Naruto with the question. "What? How can I? You are my son, Menma, Menma," cried Naruto at his son, who continued to glare at him with a dark scowl on his face, the two of them frozen in place as they looked at one another. "Your son?" Menma apologized. "It seems unlikely that my father would be the Kyuubi." Then he knelt and balled his fists. "I'm at a loss for words with you. Go ahead and give up now," he growled before his masked beast stopped fighting and began to glow bright red throughout the city. In an instant, they shot up into the sky in beams of bright red chakra, which arched up to the Akatsuki Tower and struck Menma in the back one by one, channeling their chakra into him. When the final one returned into Menma, he smiled and unleashed a torrent of his blackish-red chakra. "Kyuubi, let's see how you do against someone else of your caliber." Menma let out a roar as the chakra engulfed him, and he instantly transformed into his own six-tailed version 2 form, resembling Naruto's in every way down to the obsidian black chakra bones. "Oh my god! He must have been harmed by Indra somehow. He has absolutely no memory of me," cursed Naruto, who then turned on his version 2 mode once more and developed 6 tails in addition to the chakra bones that surrounded his body. "Menma, what made you associate with a man such as Indra? Respond to me," Naruto begged his son, but his request was ignored. "Are you not listening? I told you I didn't have anything more to say. Now stop talking and pass away," snarled Menma before hurriedly charging Naruto and launching a powerful attack. After smashing his fist into Naruto's cheek and sending him flying off the edge of the Akatsuki Tower, Menma fully changed into his titanic fox form and created a tailed beast ball, which he then threw directly at Naruto. "Naruto!" Genkaku cried out as he saw the tailed beast ball being swallowed by the fox in the air. He then unleashed a powerful laser that crashed into Naruto, taking him down with it. The laser smashed through the earth and continued underground until emerging in a sizable cavern that was filled with water beneath the city, where Naruto started to sink. Menma followed him into the cave through the enormous hole the laser had made and landed on the surface of the subterranean lake. His eyes were half open and his body was covered in bruises and pain. "Kyuubi, where are you?" Menma bellowed, peering over the water's surface for any indication of Naruto. "We must assist him." As the Akatsuki gathered around the hole's edge, all 8 of them present and counted, Genkaku spoke. "I don't think so." Turning, Suzaku glared back at the man who stood a few yards away from them, his smug expression belying his ancient battle armor from the Warring States period, which featured a dragon's face on the breastplate and no clan marks to identify it. "Indra," growled Akayuri, turning to face the Akatsuki who tensed up into a single hand gesture. Indra sneered, "You'll have to deal with me first." Then, 4 caskets materialized next to him, their covers falling to the ground with a loud thud, exposing Nagato, Yahiko, the Pratapath of Pain, and, most shocking of all, Minato. Suzaku growled, his chakra going crazy with rage, "You bastard. Reviving Naruto's own father with that sick jutsu." As flames began to emerge from his skin. "Now, let's see if the Akatsuki are who they claim to be, shall we?" While all of this was going on, Naruto was still descending into the lake beneath the surface of the earth, and Menma was still keeping a watchful eye out for him with his sharp eyes. Naruto, sinking farther and deeper below the lake's surface, thought to himself, "My own son has been the one capturing the Biju. I can't believe it." Realizing that his own son had been doing all the terrible things with Indra, no less, and that he didn't even know who he was, he had lost all hope. It broke my heart. Subsequently, he recollected all the hardships he had endured to ultimately usher in world peace, along with Nagato's advice from years prior. "Naruto, I am going to die, knowing that I have at least righted one of the many wrongs I have committed. Please, carry on my will and bring peace to the world. Konan and Omegakure will be by your side. I'm going to join Jiraiya Sensei now. It's time my horrible chapter ends, and your chapter begins. Thank you. Naruto Uzumaki, farewell." "Nagato," he said to himself before feeling a firelight appear inside of him and swiftly spread into a raging inferno. "No. I will not let myself give up, I will not." His 9 tails formed, his fur thickened, and his body grew larger as his version 2 form gave way to his Biju form. Menma yelled, "Kyuubi, show yourself," as he took one last look around the cave. Suddenly, Naruto emerged from the water, biting into one of Menma's tails. He then threw Menma across the cavern, sending him crashing through several stalagmites until he struck the wall, shattering several rocks and sending dust billowing outward in a cloud that engulfed him. Trying to reach his son once more, Naruto yelled, "Menma, listen to me. You've been brainwashed by Indra. Remember who you are." Menma responded with a roar so strong it rattled the cavern's walls, and Naruto cursed himself once more for his botched attempt. As Menma pulled himself away from the wall and charged at Naruto, the latter thought, "Looks like I'll have to go deeper." Suddenly, a tailed beast ball flew out of the cloud of smoke encasing Menma, forcing Naruto to dodge the attack and charge at Menma. The 2 Biju came into contact head-on, but Naruto was faster than his son and grabbed the other one by the throat, propelling him back up through the enormous hole in the ground and into the air. Menma was forced to return to his human form as Naruto followed suit and grabbed onto him as they flew back up to the top of the Akatsuki Tower. Menma roared in agony as the jutsu burst and severely injured him. Naruto then followed suit and formed a Rasengan in his hand, sending the ball straight into Menma's spine. Finally, Naruto was able to speak to his son face.to face after smashing him face first into the concrete roof and securing him with all 9 of his chakra tails. Menma growled at him as he fixed his enraged gaze on his father, demanding, "Menma, stop this. Do you know what you're fighting for anymore?" Naruto was a little taken aback by Menma's statement, "All I care about is fulfilling the Eye of the Moon plan and casting the infinite Tsukuyomi over the entire world. No more war, no more grudges, no more pain. There will only be peace. I'm going to rebuild our clan back to its former glory before Madara Uchiha destroyed it." Menma had discovered their clan had been destroyed, a fact that even he had been unaware of. But there was one thing he was unaware of. Menma raised an eyebrow in anticipation as Naruto pressed, "You do realize that Madara's malice and lust for power originated from his ancestor. Do you know who that is?" Menma's eyes lit up with surprise as Naruto explained, "That was Indra. Don't you get it, Menma? Indra unintentionally caused the destruction of our clan because his chakra and his will passed down to Madara, You're working with the man who caused our clan's destruction. Menma exclaimed. Why do you say, our clan? You're the Kyuubi, a Biju. You're part of no clan. Naruto gritted his teeth in rage and continued trying to talk to his son. Menma's eyes lit up as he had an epiphany, memories starting to flow through his mind like a river. That's because I am your father, Menma. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, your father. I was the first to hold you after you were born, and I knew that when you were born, you were going to change the world for the better. You were going to live a life so much better than mine, Menma said to Naruto. Menma. My son. Someday, when you are older, I just know that you're going to bring change upon this world, a change for the better, I know it. Naruto. Menma was beginning to recognize who Naruto was when he said, yes, Menma. Remember who you are, who I am. His eyes started to well up with tears as he realized how much he had done and looked around him. With tears streaming down his face, he stammered, oh God. What did I do? Did I? Naruto nodded regretfully, releasing his son and letting him get up. Oh God. Dad. I'm sorry, he uttered in a trembling voice, and then Naruto hugged and held his son, bringing the father and son back together after a long separation. Naruto allowed his son to vent all of the sadness in his heart, the darkness now lifted from his soul. It's all right. No one knows that you were the one who did this. Everything's going to be okay, Naruto said. Below, in the city streets next to the enormous hole in the ground, Indra had used chakra, absorbing handcuffs to restrain and knock out Suzaku, Arashi, Akiyuri, Noboru, and Genkaku. He had also laughed a little to himself at Noboru's attempt to seal him inside the Kijin, but he had avoided it and let Yahiko and Nagato get sealed inside instead. He had taken 5 of the 7 Akatsuki members into custody. The other 2 had been rendered unconscious, Naoshi having had his chakra drained and left to resemble a pile of sand. Minato and the Preta Path of Pain were the only remaining reincarnated shinobi that he had. He felt Menma break free from the Koto Amatsukami he had cast upon him when they first met, and he felt his eyes narrow. He then cursed to himself. It seems I will have to use this after all. Oh well. Sorry Menma. The Eye of the Moon plan must be completed at all costs. He developed a single seal and, more precisely, refined his heart in Menma. When he pushed away from him and started to shake uncontrollably, Naruto felt his heart slightly shift and Menma gasped. Naruto then started to worry about his son. Naruto's son went to his knees, clutching his chest as a black circle began to form around his heart and waves of pain shot through his veins. Menma. What's wrong? Asked Naruto in a distressed voice. The circle on Menma's chest caused random lines to appear all over Naruto's body, reaching up his neck and to his right eye before Menma's eyes closed and his face became expressionless. This left Naruto stunned. Menma. Naruto questioned once more as he advanced toward Menma, but he gasped in response to Menma's ominous smile and full rise. As Menma opened his eyes and revealed that his left eye had changed into Indra's spiraling Sharingan, Indra said, Sorry Naruto, but your son isn't here at the moment. Naruto was deeply enraged and heartbroken by this news. He was even more broken because he knew it was Indra who had taken control of him, even though it was Menma's voice speaking to him. Naruto yelled, What did you do to my son? Menma's thumb was pointing to his heart as Indra laughed. Naruto growled at Indra as he explained how he had caused Menma to lose his memory of his father. I placed a curse mark on his heart called the Puppet Master Seal. I am in full control of Menma and his entire body right now. Since you freed him from the effects of the Koto Amatsukami I cast onto him, I had to take drastic measures, Indra said. You bastard. When I get my hands on you, he started, but Menma moved forward to face him as Indra's giggling cut him off once more. Menma's left eye started to swirl, entangling Naruto in a genjutsu that would allow him to be captured. I believe you won't get the chance. The eve of the Red Dawn is tonight, and you are the final Biju left. Sorry, but I'm taking you with me, Indra said before Naruto's body locked up. Naruto snarled, That won't work on me, as he used his chakra to break his thumb and escape the genjutsu. He quickly healed the injury and used the Rasengan to attack Menma. He was about to strike into his throat, but he paused when he realized that it was still his son. This gave Indra the opportunity to have Menma kick him in the stomach and then drive his fist up into his jaw. When the Rasengan vanished and he staggered back, Indra laughed once more before giving him back Menma's personality. as demonstrated when his Sharingan vanished from Menma's eye. However, he was still able to control his body thanks to the Puppet Master seal. Menma muttered, trying to move his body independently, but Indra would not let him. "Dad, what's going on? Indra, what the hell are you doing?" "Menma," Naruto uttered as Menma struck him in the jaw once more, leaving the latter utterly appalled that it was him carrying out the attack. Menma kneed Naruto in the stomach and drove his elbow into his spine. As he hit the ground, Naruto started to cough up blood and spots started to appear in his vision from the blow to his spine. "No, stop this, please," Menma begged. Then, with one last blow to the back of Naruto's head, as well as to Menma's heart, Menma defeated his father, bringing him to tears as his body forcibly took hold of him and sprang out to the outskirts of the city, where Minato was waiting for him with cuffs that depleted chakra. Menma apologized profusely as he put the handcuffs on his father's wrists and led Minato and him back into the forest to the mountain's graveyard. Menma reluctantly moved a little bit further out in front of Naruto due to the Puppet Master seal worn on his heart, while Minato walked silently beside him on his right side with his hands securely gripped on his wrists. He turned to face his fiery and arrogant father, the Kyuubi and head of Akatsuki, and felt his heart swell at the sight of his defeated and gloomy form. With a guilty heart, he wondered, why should I even call myself his son? As the tunnel grew wider and revealed the crater Menma had grown to know so well. He bowed his head slightly, recalling that Kurama, the erstwhile Kyuubi and first and most dependable ally and friend of Naruto, had given his life to prevent Indra from unleashing the infinite Tsukuyomi upon the world. And now that was all for nothing, all because of me. As they emerged from the tunnel, the captive Akatsuki members bound in chakra, draining cuffs grinned and said, "Ah, the guest of honor arrives." Seeing that their last hope had given up and that he no longer had the strength to fight, Indra smirked. Subsequently, their eyes shifted to the man escorting Naruto to Indra, leaving them stunned, bewildered, and completely shattered. Genkaku cursed, "Damn it," realizing that his attempts to break free from his bonds were in vain. "Menma." "What?" Suzaku exclaimed in utter shock and disbelief, as did Arashi. Menma didn't even turn to face him as he went up to Indra, in part due to Indra's influence over him. Even though Menma was walking with a guilty expression on his face, Akayuri and Noboru remained motionless and could not have imagined that all this time, it was one of their own. Akayuri, not even wanting to know the anguish and suffering Naruto must have gone through when he realized the man capturing the Biju was none other than his own son, muttered, "Naruto," with a growing sense of sadness. As Naruto was stopped and pushed to his knees by his father in front of the smiling Hydra, whose red eyes glowed in the darkness, the remaining path of pain, the Preta path, looked on in complete silence. Is there nothing more that the rebellious little Biju can say? Is there no more fight in him? Sneering, Minato moved to the right of Indra, while Menma moved to the left to stand by the Preta path. When Indra gave Naruto a backhand to the cheek, sending him sprawling to the ground and causing him to spit up blood, he winced. Suzaku growled in response to the action, balling his fists and desperately wanting to put his hands around Indra's neck and choke him until the hill turned purple and blue. "That is not necessary for you to do. He's already restrained." Menma spoke, and Indra gave him a menacing sneer before flinching and rising to his full height once more. He then crossed his arms. "All right. And I take it you want me to release them all?" he questioned, gesturing to the members of the Akatsuki who were in captivity with his right hand. They were all that remained of the formidable group that, although feared and revered by equal measures by many, was thought to be the strongest living group of ninjas. Now, however, they were almost completely destroyed. "Indeed. That was our agreement," Menma firmly stated. "I bring you my father and you let them go." This is in reference to the agreement that he and Indra had made while traveling to the mountain's graveyard. "Why would you harm your own allies, Menma? To your own father, for God's sake," Noboru exclaimed, but Indra silenced him with a jagged chakra flare. With a deep sigh, he lowered his head and tapped his foot for a brief moment. He then briefly closed his eyes and gave Menma a regretful look. "I do hate to inform you of this, but plans do change." He said this, but before he knew it, the Preta path was behind Menma quicker than he could react, squeezing him with his hands interlocked behind his head and his arms tucked beneath Menma's armpits. Menma snarled, "What the hell?" as he attempted to break free, but as the Preta path gradually drained his chakra, he noticed that he was becoming weaker and eventually gave up. That backstabbing son of a bitch turned on his own ally. Genkaku growled as they observed the act of betrayal. I don't honor my commitments to people I don't intend to stick around. It's tragic but true, my boy, because you have submitted to power and evolved into the Kuro Kyuubi, a Biju who resembles your father. I will also absorb you. Indra laughed and then formed a chakra rod in his hand, saying, don't worry. When I use your chakra and the demonic statue to revive the Shinju, you'll be with your father and all the other Biju. More than before, you'll be near. He smirked, Menma's rage glaring from his exposed teeth as he laughed hysterically at the man, then turned to face his father, who had at last stood up in front of them. So, any last words, boy? Asked Indra, anticipating a mouthful of words full of optimism that would inspire bravery and the like, but instead he received the opposite. All Naruto did was raise his head and meet Menma's gaze, his hollow, hopeless eyes severing Menma's heart in two. He stammered, Dad, tears welling up in the corners of his eyes. Menma. It's okay. His fire smiled at him, and his eyes grew wide. I couldn't care less about the outcome. In any case, you have my admiration. Not many people can do what you did when you absolutely destroyed your old man. Naruto laughed, his smile continuing as Akiyuri lost control and turned away, Noboru giving her a tight hug in an attempt to console her. Menma. I just want you to know this, Menma, too overcome with emotion at seeing his father about to give him his final testament, began Naruto. With a look of disgust, Indra rolled his eyes and tightly held the chakra receiver, his blade aching to taste blood. Menma. Enough of this. Menma saw Indra stab Naruto in the back, piercing his heart and exiting his chest, severing the final few words of his sentence. Menma's eyes flinched, and his entire body went paralyzed. No. Suzaku exclaimed before clutching his chest, his body trembling from the immense anguish and despair of witnessing his brother be killed in cold blood. Menma's wide eyes followed the trail of blood from the blade's tip to Naruto's face. His kind smile persisted, despite the fact that his body was growing colder and his light was beginning to fade. As he pushed Naruto's dying form off the blade, Indra uttered the words, and with the fall of the light, darkness rises. He then smiled maniacally as he watched Naruto stumble forward a bit towards Menma, the latter reeling away from him so he may not be touched. Despite this, Naruto managed to give his son one last look before collapsing to his knees and thudding to the ground. Arashi stammered, Jesus, at the heinous deed of callousness, while Akiyuri recoiled at the sound of Naruto's sickening thump on the floor. With his gaze now fixed on Menma, Indra said, however, to break the silence that had descended upon the crater. Since you were my partner in all of this and helped me achieve what I am about to do, I will give you the pleasure of being absorbed first. He laughed and said as he broke off the chakra receiver, which clanged as it struck the rock beneath them. You know, it's quite hilarious really, his voice the only sound in the crater, he said through his snickers. When I came back to this miserable world all those years ago, I was incredibly conceited and brash, believing that everyone was beneath me and that I could succeed in any situation. Quite the opposite of who I am now. I even sent out a vision of myself as my elderly father, just to warn Naruto, the other Biju, and Jinchuriki about who I really was. Funny, how foolish they were to trust me, he remarked. Then his smile turned into a frown as he vented some of his rage. I had you completely in the palm of my hand, but that foolish fox contained me inside of himself. Nevertheless, spending so much time trapped inside of him and that shard gave me the opportunity to rethink my approach. You were the final component I required to complete my plan. And look where we are now. All thanks to you, Menma, who had already passed away and was unable to move, think, or respond to anything, was extended a hand by Indra, who grinned once more. With his lifeless, cold eyes staring at Naruto's corpse, Minato's expressionless face remained expressionless due to Indra's continued hold over his reanimated body. For a split second, a very brief split second, his eyes flickered with the image of his dead son burned into them. All right, now is the moment. Goodbye, Kyuubi, sneered Indra, ready to absorb Menma, as he approached him with an outstretched hand, forgetting all about his name and severing all connections with him. The Preda path retreated and released Menma, the young man who was no longer even fighting because his will was broken. His mind was completely shattered, and his heart was an empty pit of grief and hopelessness. As Indra's hand approached Menma's chest, he repeated, "This is the end." The Akatsuki members were forced to watch the act unfold and were unable to stop it. When he saw a flash of yellow, his hand stopped just centimeters from Menma's skin, and Indra's eyes widened at the hand firmly gripping his wrist. He traced it back to its owner and discovered it belonged to a scowling Minato, who no longer had lifeless, empty eyes. Anger filled the Sharingan and Rinnegan that had been given to him now. "I don't appreciate you killing my son." Before a blue light burst from his hand, the man growled. Minato then smashed the Rasengan he had formed into Indra's stomach, sending him hurtling backwards and creating a seal where he struck him. As he did so, Minato teleported to him and dug his knee into Indra's back, breaking his spine with a loud snap. Then, he swung around and smashed another Rasengan into his jaw, breaking that too, and sent him crashing into the crater wall. Then Minato used one of his kunai to strike the Pratapath squarely in the forehead, teleporting to him in an instant. Then, using another kunai, he severed the Pratapath's head from his shoulders. "Holy shit!" exclaimed Noboru, amazed at the man as he hit the ground. He turned around to see Indra rising to his feet, his wounds gradually healing as he held onto his jaw and realigned it so he could speak again. "I shouldn't have underestimated Konoha's yellow flash. That won't happen again." He spoke this while popping his back, which had now healed, and rolling his wrist. He was looking at Minato when he took 5 of his marked kunai out of his pouch, one of which he held in his hand, and launched them to various locations within the crater. With a quick glance back at him, he exclaimed, "Menma, you need to free your friends and help me fight," but realized his words had been ignored because he had remained motionless the entire time, trapped in the shock-induced trance. It appeared as though he was not breathing. Minato cried out, "Menma," but his words were ignored once more. Menma's knees suddenly gave way, and he dropped to his knees, his gaze never leaving his father's lifeless body. To Minato's dismay, she then reaches over Naruto's body, seizing the black chakra recorder that Indra had used to murder him. She holds it firmly in his hands and drives the rod through his chest. Blood began to pool from his slightly open mouth and the self-inflicted wound that killed him as he collapsed to the ground next to his father. Menma had lost all desire to live. Minato growled to himself, "Damn it," he pushed him that far over the edge to where he wanted to die. Then, he threw the kunai Suzaku was holding and watched as he swiftly cut through the cuffs holding him and the others, setting the Akatsuki members free. Arashi inquired on behalf of Akayuri, who was too distraught to talk, what happened to Menma. She had no idea that she was going to get another shock. Minato said, "The shock of seeing his father, my son, pushed him over the edge and he lost the will to live. He took the very same weapon used to kill Naruto and ended his own life. Before he trailed off." Suzaku then cursed before locking his enraged eyes on the man who had done this, fire beginning to flare across his body as his anger-enhanced chakra flared. Akayuri dropped to her knees, unable to look away from the 2 people she loved the most in the world, Naruto and Menma, who were no longer with her. Minato came up beside him, his fists clenched, as he growled, "I'm gonna rip that bastard's throat out." As he walked in their direction, Indra exclaimed, "So, I'll be having the honor of fighting the Yellow Flash and the Vermilion Bird?" Arashi snarled, and the Red Demon of Shimo. He stood next to the 2, steam pouring off of him as he removed his rebreather mask, exposing sharpened fangs and steam formed by his breath that, like the boil release, would corrode anything it came into contact with. Darkly speaking, Genkaku pulled out 4 scrolls, one in each hand, ready to call forth whatever puppets he still had. "And the Black Puppet Master of Suna," he said. Observing that Noboru would not be fighting, Indra moved from one to the other in order to console Akayuri. "Well then. Let's get started. He's gone. He's really gone." Menma stood at the intersection of life and death, in the shadows of limbo. He would soon be traveling to the latter, his mind constantly replaying the picture of his deceased father, as though mocking him and holding him accountable for his demise. "You killed him. You killed him. You killed him." He moaned through the anguish of his heart and the stinging tears of guilt as he felt a sharp pain in the back of his skull. With his teeth bared, he bellowed into the darkness, "Damn it! Damn it!" as his demonic chakra flared to the brink of erupting into a raging inferno. Menma felt a new chakra suddenly enter the empty space. It was calming to his body and soul, and eventually his chakra returned to normal, leaving him standing motionless with his head hung low and his eyes swollen and red from tears shed. Menma silently questioned, "Who's there?" as he peered around the shadows to find the source of the peaceful chakra. From the shadows came the voice that said, "Menma, your father's death was not your fault." "Yes, it is. I led him there and he killed him. I killed him." No, it's mine. A pair of barely distinguishable glowing eyes emerged from the shadows, causing Menma to squint. H. How? How is it your fault? The man who killed your father was my son. Your son? What do you mean? Menma inquired, and then the eyes blinked and they drew nearer, revealing to her who they truly belonged to with their ripple-like pattern. Menma blinked at the abrupt change from darkness to light, but he quickly adjusted and stood in awe, his eyes lighting up with wonder as the most revered and legendary figure in history revealed himself to him. Suddenly, the darkness was filled with a soft, soothing light. He was a very old man, with long goatee that hung down to his waist and shaggy, reddish, gray hair that spiked up at the top. He had well-defined brow ridges, little horns sticking out of his forehead, and a red mark in the middle of his forehead that resembled Rinnegan. He was sitting on a black shakuho that was floating horizontally behind him, with one side of the ring half completed and the other full with 6 smaller rings hanging from it. The black orbs were small and of an unidentified substance. He was also wearing a full-length white kimono with a high collar adorned with a pattern of 6 red magatama. Beneath the kimono was a necklace made of the same 6 magatama. A larger Rinnegan-like symbol with 9 magatama arranged in 3 rows underneath it was painted on the back of his cloak. The man gave Menma a commanding, proud, and modest impression as he fixed his gaze on her. Menma, unable to contain his surprise, heard him say, I am the creator of peace, law, and order. I am he known as Hagoromo, and as he who founded Ninshu, I am also known as the Sage of 6 Paths. The amazing chakra he was radiating as well as his demeanor, despite being the most powerful man in history, he was humble and kind, left him completely in awe. Menma began, No way. The same sage that my father. But his heart began to pound and he choked on his words. Hagoromo, sensing the uncertainty and sorrow in Menma, smiled in response. Yes, that is I, Menma said. I can't believe I'm meeting with the guy that created ninjutsu, sounding shocked, but Hagoromo snarled at him and took hold of his shakuho. Not ninjutsu, ninshu. My ninshu was created to inspire hope. Do not confuse it with ninjutsu, for that was made to create war. Even though you're that sage, I appreciate you coming to see me here, but I can't get over the horror I did to my family. Menma scowled a little before lowering his head and speaking. Thus, if you would please, I must. Hagoromo interrupted him by tapping the watery plain beneath them with the full ring on his left shakuho end, creating ripples that projected the image of another man. He looked down at the reflection and said to himself, You are my son Ashura's. The man had short, spiky black hair that framed his face in 2 locks that were wrapped in bandages. He wore a kimono that was almost exactly like Hagoromo's, with the exception that his had a black sash around the waist. He also wore a blank forehead protector. Anyway, everything seems to be in order. The time is right. Ashura, what are you saying incoherently to yourself? At the old man's mumbling, Menma asked. I'm sorry, but you have a lot of things to learn. We'll start talking about my mother and kids, Hagoromo said, apologizing, and then he tapped the water next to the man's reflection with his shakuho, causing another reflection to appear. The image was of a woman with long, light-colored hair that reached the ground, horn-like protrusions from her head, and an intricately lined kimono with tomo running down the center and edges of the gown. The most unsettling thing Menma saw was that the woman had pale, pupilless eyes with a slit running down the middle of her forehead, just above her eyebrows. Alright, so she had the Byakugan, but why was there a cut in the middle of her forehead? Menma pondered before Hagoromo started talking once more. My mother, Kagaya Otostuski, traveled a great distance to arrive in your country. He started, saying, she had come to pluck the fruit of the sacred tree. Beside her image, a mural depicting a large tree looming behind it and an image of an enormous, upside-down heart-shaped fruit appeared. The Shinju was the name given to this holy tree. The tree of God. It bore a fruit that held immense power known as chakra once every 1,000 years. To consume that fruit, my mother had come. When the scene cut to Kagaya standing by a balcony with her arms outstretched over the land, Menma was appalled by the sight of enormous thunderstorms and tornadoes dotting the landscape. With the power she gained from eating the fruit, she was able to rule over this land. Anyway, where was she coming from? Was she, the Sage of 6 Paths, even more powerful than you? Asked Menma, raising an eyebrow, and Hagoromo smiled a little before taking a more serious tone. Menma nodded as he answered, where she came from is of no importance, and she was powerful, more powerful than anyone. My mother was referred to by the populace as the demon or the rabbit goddess. Terrified, they adored her. She eventually became a mother of 2 children. One of which was me, he sadly stated, before the scene next to the picture of Kaguya changed once more to show 2 men brandishing swords and shikuhos against a hideous creature that had a glowing red eye, a mouth, horns, and a disfigured face that resembled a cross between a Rinnegan and a Sharingan. We battled the god tree's physical manifestation, also referred to as the Jubi, in an effort to atone for our mother's unfinished business. Hagoromo spoke, his eyes now slightly saddened by the thought of his dead brother. The Jubi raged and battled to recover the power that had been taken from it, but in the end, my brother sacrificed himself to severely weaken the beast so that I may seal it within myself to save the world from its wrath. Anyway, as time passed, I also became a parent. I gave the older son, Indra, and the younger son, Ashura. I taught them both Ninshu, he continued, glancing at Menma, who narrowed his eyes at the mention of the first name. But there was one significant distinction between the two. One received my powerful chakra genes, while the other did not. The genetic disparity between the two was quite noticeable. Or, to put it another way, in other words, Hagoromo uttered before using the right side of the shikuho to tap the peaceful water next to Kaguya's image, creating an image of Indra at that moment. As Ashura's image reappeared on the other side of Kaguya, forming a sort of family portrait, he concluded, the superior brother was Indra, and the flunky useless dropout, Ashura. Menma reflected on his father's account of his past and remarked, useless dropout. Even though his father was the sage of 6 paths. It was precisely how Hagoromo depicted his younger son's life. Against all odds and viewed as worthless and of no use. Hagoromo smiled slightly at Menma and said, no matter how superior or excellent the parents are, that power won't necessarily be inherited by the child, as I'm sure you're aware of. It's unfortunate that your father went through everything he did, but even after all of that, he was still able to find the person he loved and form enduring friendships. Your father was a lot like this when he was younger. He is genuinely a remarkable man. With everything he's accomplished, he really does resemble Ashura. By doing what he has? With an eyebrow raised, Menma questioned. He wants to give his all to people around him, especially those who are less fortunate than him. Hagoromo went on to discuss Ashura's and Indra's past before getting back to business. He has a deep sense of trust in his comrades and depends on them when the going gets tough. In any case, Ashura's and Indra's paths diverged greatly. Indra had strong eyes and a keen sense of battle from birth. Many hailed him as a genius. He was aware that his power was unique and distinct from those around him and used it to accomplish everything. He also started to think that everything was possible if you had power. How far he has fallen, Hagoromo said, raising one hand to represent Indra and the other to represent Ashura. On the other hand, there was the younger Ashura, who has been terrible at everything since he was a young child. There was nothing he could do on his own. He had to put in a lot of work on his own and get help from people around him in order to become as strong as his brother. And shortly after that, the image of Ashura changed to show him with his body covered in a sort of brightly glowing cloak made of orange and yellow chakra, with the chakra itself resembling a flickering flame. After intense training, the chakra in his body blossomed, giving him strength comparable to that of his brother. He was captivated by Ashura's feet connecting to Menma's, as if they were reflections of each other, and he realized that anything was possible with love. By observing how Ashura lived, I became aware of a new possibility. I divided up the power of the Shinju within me and gave each part a name. Menma recognized the image that caught his attention as he spoke, grinning. I thought true power lay in the bonds of cooperation, where he had conceived and spoken to the tiny and impressionable Biju. It must have been Kurama, he thought, grinning at the young fox who would grow up to be his father's closest friend and ally. In order for Ashura to lead everyone, I also appointed him as the leader of Ninshu. I had assumed his brother Indra would assist and join in, but, said Hagoromo menacingly, Menma's curiosity piqued at the tension created by the sage's words. That was not acceptable to Indra. He desired more power for himself, but he also wanted to follow in my mother's footsteps and use it to bring about peace. And at that very moment, he said, and that was the very moment, this long war began, being continued by Ashura's and Indra's successors, the Uchiha and the Senju. Menma grimaced, realizing how long Indra's ambitions had been the source of conflict. When their bodies were destroyed, the chakra that they had built up didn't disappear. but was reborn throughout the ages time and time again, countless individuals gaining their individual wills and powers, until they finally reside where they are today. I am aware that Indra is still alive, but what became of Ashura? Who got his chakra from him? Menma inquired, and Hagoromo pointed right at him. You, Menma. You are the new birth of Ashura. Living. Oh my god, cursed Minato as he watched Suzaku being thrown back by Indra's incomplete Susanoo. Arashi, Genkaku, and the other two men were all completely battered and bruised to the point of chakra exhaustion, except for Minato, who was able to maintain his chakra due to the Edo Tensei. However, he had lost both of his arms to Indra's unrelenting attacks and defenses during the battle that had been going on ever since Naruto and Menma's deaths. Furthermore, since he rebelled against Indra's rule, he has lost the ability to manifest his Sharingan Susanoo, despite having both the Rinnegan and the Sharingan. Inside his Susanoo's ribcage, Indra, on the other hand, was completely unharmed. From behind the Amaterasu ridden ribcage of his Susanoo, he mocked, "Come on now, you were really close that time," before looking up at the moon and standing motionless, an evil smile beginning to form on his face. "Oh no," stammered Genkaku as the moon completed its last phase and turned a dark red, the sky going completely black. "It's the blood moon rising." As he took out the scroll of the crimson moon and read the last seal, adding it to the string of seals he needed to complete his mission, Indra said, "It's time." Kachiyose no Jutsu. Gedo Mazo. A red beam of light appeared around Indra, causing the ground to tremble. A large hand then emerged from the ground, followed by the upper body and finally the entire form of the demonic statue of the outer path. Minato yelled, "No," at this. With his eyes fixed on the two Akatsuki members huddled over a form lying on the ground next to Menma, Indra uttered the words, "Now for the final piece of the puzzle. Permit me to take him from you." He sneered as white Zetsu burst out of the earth beneath Naruto, sending Akiyori and Noboru reeling back as he grabbed hold of Naruto and pulled him underground. Ashish. T. Cursed Noboru as Zetsu materialized under the cover of Indra's Susanoo, giving him Naruto with a menacing grin. Indra reciprocated the gesture by grabbing him by the throat. "Nah!" Akiyori cried out, while Indra kept grinning maniacally. He said, "Thank you White Zetsu for your deeds." Then, to the dismay of all, he grabbed White Zetsu by the throat and drained him of all remaining chakra until he shriveled and turned to dust. After that, he absorbed Naruto into himself, turning himself into the Jinchuriki of all 9 Biju, meaning he had only one step left. The demonic statue of the outer path opened its wide mouth, ready to accept what it would receive, as he brought his hands together. Kusari no Mazo. Coughing slightly, Indra let out a cry as a big purple chain shot out of the statue's mouth and went straight through him. "Seal!" he bellowed, then released his hold on his Susanoo, allowing the chain to rip all 9 of the Biju from inside of him, albeit painfully, and seal them inside the statue until the last Biju entered its maw to start the transformation. "Go back. Jubi." The 10 eyes of the demonic statue opened wide, signaling the end, and it roared in excruciating pain. "Jabuna kan kaisei." Indra uttered as tiny black flames materialized on his fighting hand's fingers. He then slammed it into the earth, causing a massive cylinder of red fire to burst around the demonic statue and him, concealing and guarding them. Before the demonic statue completely changes, we must remove that barrier and put an end to it, crying. Genkaku unbuttoned his cloak and threw it aside, causing a hole in his chest to open and spew a thick cloud of black iron powder that soon congealed into enormous, triangular shapes with razor-sharp points. "Is that your fabled iron sand, then? We will strike it simultaneously with our combined strikes." Suzaku smiled, forming a string of signs for one of his most potent and well-known attacks while cracking his neck. Taio. Shin no Sodai na Taweringu. En no Tatsumaki ni Kaden. With that, he let loose a massive fire tornado that was surrounded by Genkaku's iron sand constructions. The combined attacks impacted and ground against the surface of the fire pillar, causing the constructs to disintegrate and drift back towards Genkaku as the fire tornado subsided. Suzaku bent down and inhaled deeply, his hands on his knees as he coughed and wheezed. "How are you doing?" I asked, a worried expression on Minato's face. Suzaku laughed, got back up, and wiped some blood that was trickling from his nose. "Hey, I'm okay, yeah. That's just a little bit of lightheadedness. I'm on your side. Kaden. Go Enku. It's a giant meteor, sized ball of fire that races across the ground, leaving a trail of molten destruction underneath it, uttered Arashi as he let out a massive explosion that rocked the earth. The ball of fire collided with the fire pillar. Suzaku laughed merrily at the enormous fireball as the Akatsuki members were forced to shield their eyes from the shockwave that nearly blew them away. Sure of their victory over Indra, he yelled through the carnage, "Yeah. That's some serious fireworks," with an outrageous smile. Minato, watching through narrowed eyes as the fireball subsided, thought, he couldn't have possibly survived that. The fireball's light dissipated, and dense clouds of dust covered the entire crater, making it impossible for the Akatsuki member to see their surroundings. "Is it over?" Noboru inquired from his position, while Genkaku used his sensor abilities to search the area for even the tiniest trace of chakra, but he found none. With a sigh of relief, he said, "I don't sense anything. That attack must have obliterated him." Suzaku then wiped the perspiration from his brow as everyone froze in place, realizing that the chakra they had previously sensed was back and getting stronger. "No fucking way." Arashi cursed as the dust finally settled and everyone turned to face their enemy, who had not only come back to life but also undergone a radical transformation. The Rinnegan-like symbol on his back had 9 Magatama arranged in 3 rows beneath it, and he had gained a pitch black cloak with an open cuff and 6 red Magatama around his chest. He resembled Hagoromo in appearance as a solid strip of metal formed over his forehead and sprouted 2 evil horns that extended upward. Eventually, a shakuho appeared in his left hand, with an oval-shaped ring that was partially formed and several black orbs that levitated behind it. Madara's attire after transforming into Jinchuriki for the Jubi. "The world is about to end. You have no hope. The infinite Tsukuyomi will come to pass." Indra, now the Jinchuriki of the Jubi, pointed a finger at each of them. Noboru said, "All right, I'm ready to join in on this facade," joining the other members of Akatsuki in facing death. Suzaku had finally caught his breath when Indra sneered, "Even with another man joining in, you're all still nothing but rubble. There's nothing you can do now." He asked in a serious tone, "How's everyone's chakra reserves?" Minato spoke first. "I'm fine, but I'm in no condition to form any seals and perform any jutsu," he stated. "With regret," Arashi said, "that last jutsu drained most of my chakra, but I can manage it." Genkaku said, "Same here. I can barely control my iron sand." And then he let go of the control, allowing the iron sand to fall to the ground. Noboru answered, "I'm good on chakra." Suzaku said in a dead serious voice, shocking everyone, "Okay. I need you all to give me as much chakra as you can without killing yourself." Arashi questioned, "Why? You're not thinking of." Suzaku then grinned, took out his last cigar, lit it, and took a puff. "I'm finishing this with my most powerful technique." In defiance of Suzaku's choice, Genkaku exclaimed, "No. You can't do that, Suzaku. You'll kill yourself." Suzaku said, "It's too late, I've already made up my mind." He then gave them a quick glance and smiled. Then he stood motionless, allowing Noboru, Arashi, and Genkaku to channel as much chakra as they could into him. "The days of being the vermilion bird are over. It's time for the Crimson Phoenix to take flight," he repeated. Then, to their surprise, Akayuri put her hand on him too, giving him all of her chakra while maintaining a casual smirk on her face. She said, "Suzaku. Raise hell." Suzaku nodded, rolled his shoulder, and moved forward, drawing an eyebrow from Indra. He smoked his cigar one last time before discarding it, thinking to himself, "Hey, never thought I would be doing this." As tiny flames began to flicker throughout his body as his chakra intensified. As Indra watched Suzaku's chakra circle around a tenketsu directly over his heart, he wondered, his chakra is going towards his heart. What does he have up his sleeve? With his eyes shut, Suzaku placed his hand over his heart on his chest, causing the flames on his body to shift from a bright orange to a darker red before exploding into a massive column of fire that reached the sky and took the shape of a phoenix. Suzaku exclaimed, "Kinjutsu! Kyoi! En Shinetsu Heron Yuyoku!" just before the flames surrounding him turned into a raging maelstrom, leaving Genkaku completely stunned by the sight. He exclaimed, "You're really doing it," as the others departed in a similar daze. Suzaku's Akatsuki cloak broke apart due to the intense fire, causing his skin to turn a shade of orange. The Jinchuriki was glaring at him as he turned to face Indra. Suzaku clenched his fists and grinned as he said, So, this is the Vermilion Bird's most powerful technique. It truly is a wonderful spectacle, Indra said. I developed this method by studying the 8 gates, particularly the last gate, the gate of death. Using this method, he uttered before suddenly appearing in front of Indra and shocking the god by arching his back. I'm faster and stronger than ever. Fushicho Kuro, first strike. A solid wall of red fire erupted faster than Indra could react, smashing into him and severely burning his hands as he tried to block the attack. Indra grunted. Indra saw Suzaku poised for another strike as he sent him smashing through the earth, creating a deep hole composed of molten and scorched rock. Suzaku cried out, second strike, but froze when he felt his shoulder snap, stopping himself mid-air to deal with the pain. He stopped in mid-air, exclaimed Noboru, while Genkaku cast a somber glance at Suzaku. This jutsu was formed after observing the 8 gates, mostly the last and most fatal gate, the gate of death. Not only does it increase your speed and strength, but with Suzaku's natural ability to excrete flames from his body with his chakra, he can form solid walls or blades of fire that can superheat and or cut through anything with ease. Especially flesh. Arashi offered an explanation. But why did he stop? The jutsu puts the caster through pain beyond torture. What just happened was that Suzaku's shoulder must have snapped. Also, the tenketsu used to utilize this jutsu is located at the heart, and it saps the user's chakra and regrettably blood, creating the red fire emanating from his skin until ultimately the user dies. Suzaku groaned and rolled his broken shoulder around, thinking, Jesus, that fucking hurts. But I think I'm used to it now. I can't give him any openings, before preparing to launch another attack. At the bottom of Suzaku's hole, Indra lay beneath some soot, his eyes half open while the burnt skin on his hands and arms began to heal. He thought to himself, a nintaijutsu attack that not only hits you with enough force to break bones, but with fire that can melt your skin off. Indra grunted as the new skin on his hands and arms took hold. One of the horns on his forehead protector snapped off. As he rose from the ground and unexpectedly shot out of the hole, shocking Suzaku, he thought to himself, if I got hit with more of that technique, I would be in trouble. Above all else, I should avoid direct contact with that technique again. Suzaku scowled at Indra and raced upward after him, kicking the air to get higher and higher. Seeing this new technique in action is a rare sight indeed. So at the very least, I'll indulge and entertain a fight for a while. Indra laughed. Suzaku tightened his fists and kicked up the air more quickly, threatening to rip out Indra's throat as he approached her. He's coming up to me by kicking the air, Indra exclaimed. Minato turned to address the others, saying, pay close attention, we're Suzaku's support. As he kicked one of his marked kunai into the air, Genkaku caught it. Arashi said, it seems those black orbs floating around him are made of an unknown substance, but I'm getting a bad vibe from them. They may be a potential weapon. Minato nodded. The others nodded in agreement as Minato stated, when the opportunity presents itself, we'll rob him of them. Then, they watched the next few moments carefully in case their opportunity arrived. Suzaku was currently circling Indra so quickly that it appeared as though a solid ring of fire was encircling the man, and Indra was keeping a close eye on Suzaku to see when he would strike. Then he launched an assault. Fushicho Kuro, first strike, Suzaku exclaimed as he raced toward Indra. Indra immediately formed a strong shield out of the black material, which Suzaku struck precisely as he zoomed past it. Indra turned to face Suzaku in the back and grunted as Suzaku struck him again, severely scorching his flesh and rupturing the back of his cloak. Second strike. Third strike. Fourth strike. Suzaku cried out as he struck Indra repeatedly, the Jinchuriki immobilized as each blow tore into his skin, deeply scorching it and causing his cloak to fray. GWUH. Barked Indra, spitting blood from his mouth as Suzaku finished off the fourth blow before quickly charging in for a fifth. Fifth strike. Here he comes. As one of the black orbs began to form around Indra to protect him while the other black spheres fired at him, Genkaku exclaimed, just keep going, Suzaku. Minato's marked kunai was thrown by Genkaku into the air, directly between Suzaku and the black spheres. Minato teleported there in an instant to avoid being hit by the spheres, then quickly disappeared once more, while Suzaku continued toward the black spherical shield holding Indra. And then, right next to the sphere, came Arashi, who had dark red circles around his eyes. He took a deep breath and said, Senpo. Sansei Buresu. Then he exhaled, allowing his superheated, highly corrosive, and senjutsu chakra-enhanced breath to touch the sphere and melt its surface, exposing Indra within to the approaching attack. Shit. Before Suzaku connected the fire blade that had formed around his fist, he cursed Indra. Then, he struck Indra's right shoulder with his fist, shattering the bones there and sending Indra hurtling out through the black sphere and skydiving for several hundred feet before coming to rest on the ground. When Indra got up again, Suzaku coughed and knelt, wiping the blood that was starting to run down his chin. The wound in his shoulder was healing as he did this, and a lot of blood was streaming down his chin. I've never been this excited since Ashura. Is it still possible for you to dance? Please keep me entertained for a little while longer, Suzaku pleaded to Indra, grinning maniacally as he prepared for another attack. This is going to hurt a lot. He pondered for a moment before attacking Indra once more and once more. He attacked the man without mercy, hitting him repeatedly, and with each blow, the man took more and more damage, leaving Suzaku more and more worn out and drained, his mouth dripping blood and his body aching. He coughed up blood and put his hand on an overturned stone before scanning his surroundings for his opponent. Did the Phoenix Claw actually work? His cloak was in tatters, half of his forehead protector had broken off, and a ton of blood was emerging from the scorched flesh and wounds all over his body and mouth. He asked through hoarse breaths, with the area covered in dust. Indra reappeared in nearly the same state as Suzaku. He laughed, ha ha ha. Very nice. Let's dance some more. Suzaku coughed once more before he made his choice. His thoughts were, I have no choice. I have to use the Crimson Phoenix. And he dropped to the ground, placing his hands in front of him and his right foot in front of his left back, almost like a runner starting position. With a slight frown on his face, Indra peered at Suzaku's chakra network and saw the tenketsu over his heart begin to fade. Indra said, looking from your heart's tenketsu, I can tell. This next attack will be your last. His voice carried a hint of sadness at the end of the fight. With the flames surrounding his body growing stronger and the wind blowing from their raging strength strong enough to make the Akatsuki members yell to themselves, Suzaku cried out, ha! 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 Release, as he passed the point of no return. Noboru exclaimed, that's not the Phoenix Claw. Genkaku narrowed his eyes as he watched the flames get closer. Arashi exclaimed, does he have another technique even more powerful than the last? Suzaku smiled as he warmed up for his last blow, remembering moments spent with Naruto and the others and treasured their memories, but then his smile vanished and he made eye contact with Indra. His body was strained to the breaking point, the fires raging all around him getting out of control, and his skin turned a deep, charcoal black with bright red veins popping out. After eliminating the black orbs, Minato returned to the group and asked, what is he doing? While observing Suzaku as he continued to strengthen his chakra. He's past the point of no return. This is his final attack. That's good, that means this entire charade would be over. No, Genkaku replied, clenching his fists in sorrow that he had been unable to stop him. With a tone that informed Minato of Suzaku's doom, the puppet master declared, this is his last attack. Ever. Minato's eyes softened. Suzaku bellowed one last cry and ran at Indra faster than anything that had ever been seen before, laughing as he held his arms up to block the wild, raging winds surrounding the roaring fires coming from Suzaku. This chakra. It's definitely something. As far as taijutsu or even ninjutsu goes, there has only been one person who has reached your level, exclaimed Indra. With his eyes wide with wonder and excitement at the impending attack, Indra watched in horror as the flames behind him transformed into a massive, soaring phoenix with wings miles across. His eyes widened in surprise as his shikuho began to bend outward. He's fast. All he could think was, what? He's twisting the very air around him? As Suzaku leapt into the air and put out his foot, causing the phoenix's wing to shoot out along with him. Shinku Fushicho. He cried out as he struck Indra's stomach, causing him to spit out a lot of blood and cause his eyes to nearly pop out of their sockets. The two were then sent exploding back, with Suzaku's entire leg breaking apart into multiple pieces and Indra's entire rib cage shattering upon intact, piercing his organs. A massive explosion of light and fire then radiated outward from the attack, sending Genkaku, Arashi, Akayuri, Minato, and Noboru flying backward due to the force of the explosion. As he crashed into the ground and skidded to a stop, Genkaku cried out, Gwa? Arashi wrapped his hands around a boulder and grabbed onto Minato. Akiyuri dug her feet into the ground and braced herself against the wind, and Noboru barely managed to stab his swords into the ground and hang on for dear life. Arashi yelled, "Holy shit!" as the explosion continued to brighten and Akiyuri covered her eyes. The Crimson Phoenix caused a massive cloud of fire and smoke to rise miles high into the sky, and the explosion was so powerful that it caused the ground to tremble. Genkaku watched the firestorm below, his eyes barely open from being blinded by the strong winds and the brilliant light shooting from the explosion's superheated core. Suzaku. He thought to himself. At last, the fire subsided, leaving behind a molten wasteland, and the wind slowed and the light started to fade. With a grunt, Noboru fell onto his stomach, Arashi released his hold on the rock, and Minato, Genkaku, and Akiyuri slowly rose off the ground, all of them searching obediently for their friend who had put his life in danger to put an end to this. They were curious as to whether it was really over and what had become of their comrade. Limbo, to be honest, Menma wasn't even shocked when the sage finally processed his words and he stared blankly at the elderly man, who smiled at him. He said, "Matter of factly, with my eyes, I can clearly see. Ashura's chakra is clinging tightly to you." Menma began to feel uneasy about someone standing behind him and then cast a quick glance over his shoulder. Menma's nod of agreement and his voice going silent provided Hagoromo with all the evidence he needed to ask, "Judging from how you're not surprised. You've probably already felt Ashura's presence inside of yourself, haven't you?" Menma grew gloomy at the mention of his father once more. Hagoromo said, "As I suspected. In that case, you must know that Indra's chakra was once reincarnated into someone as well, correct? Your father knew who he was." "Yeah. Sasuke Uchiha. It was him, right?" "Correct, and as you know, when he was killed, Indra's chakra manifested itself in the material plane and possessed a former man to walk to Earth again. That is why he is here now." Menma asked, "What about before the successors? How did things turn out for them?" Hagoromo glanced back at him. He spoke solemnly, recalling the fate of the two men. The successors of the first generation were Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha. Hashirama was Ashura, and Madara was Indra. I believe you know what became of them. However, before Madara could pass on to the next successor, he introduced a problem. Madara, who had become consumed with his, or I should be saying Indra's, lust for power, took Hashirama's strength. In other words, Ashura's chakra and Indra's chakra had fused together in one vessel. This ultimately led him to my own chakra's power. It had awakened the Rinnegan. Revealed Hagoromo, Menma's eyes widening to his mind. My mother possesses the Rinnegan because she was a former path of pain. Menma nodded in agreement with his suspicions before Hagoromo tapped the water beneath them once more, this time changing Kaguya's image. The Rinnegan she possesses is not a true Rinnegan, it only gives her the power of the Asura path. The 6 paths of pain were an attempt to utilize the power of the Rinnegan through multiple individuals instead of just one. It held great power, but severe drawbacks. But, since you are her son, you possess the recessive genes of the Rinnegan, regardless of it being not a true Rinnegan. Hagoromo spoke as the image of Kaguya changed to one where the slit on her forehead revealed to be a third eye holding the same Rinnegan. Sharingan hybrid eye that was on the Jubi, frightening Menma. The chakra of Ninshu is the power to connect people to one another. It's my belief that no one person's chakra should be so much greater than any other person's. My mother Kaguya, even as she brought an end to these troubled times, she controlled the world with the power of just one person. Before long, her power gave birth to great hubris. People began to fear the existence of such a great power. As Hagoromo sighed, Indra's image changed to reflect his current appearance. My mother, once called the Rabbit Goddess, came to be feared as a demon for this reason. If power is accumulated into one person, that power before long drives that person mad. Right now the same thing is happening to Indra. Just like my mother Kaguya. Indra has obtained the power of the Shinju, a power close to mine, and is attempting to gain a power like Kaguya's. How did Indra call forth the demonic statue? And he. Indeed. He has turned into the Jinchuriki of the Jubi, declared Hagoromo, while Menma stood motionless and displayed a bewildered look on his face. As the user retains access to their power, each person lives on in an illusionary dream created by the infinite Tsukuyomi, which does more than just grant one a genjutsu. Hagoromo spoke grimly as another image appeared, depicting innumerable men and women wrapped tightly in bandages like mummies, with a small root connecting their necks to a larger root of the Shinju, sustaining their lives eternally while they stayed under the Genjutsu. Everyone connected to the god tree in their sleep. A technique to create living slaves, he said. Menma gasped in shock at the idea of such a fate, saying, "Oh my god." The idea of being trapped in a state of perpetual sleep was horrifying. Kagaya possessed the Sharingan's power in addition to the Byakugan. She created a horrifying jutsu by using those eye powers on the citizens of the country. Menma paled at the ominous prophecy. If all chakra became one, a new chakra fruit will be. If nothing is done to stop that from happening, the world will come to an end, said Hagoromo. Hagoromo saw that he still had some fire in him as he tightened his fists and hung his head, giving off a slight growl. Holding his hand to his stomach, a gesture he had started to do often in remembrance of the seal he once had to contain Shuka before he assimilated him and became the Biju himself, Menma laughed a little at the truth and said, "I think you want to stop Indra. Unlike the previous successors, you've got this strange bit of foolishness to you, and that has possibly given birth to this different possibility. Even though you've been dead and watching over everything for this long, and seen the world become peaceful thanks to my father, then it come crashing down to this. Thank you for still believing in us." The rippling images in the water below faded to nothing, and Hagoromo said rather plainly, "Don't thank me. I don't have that kind of vision. The world right now is Indra, no, what my mother would have it become." Menma scowled at the sage's detached demeanor, believing that he would be somewhat more disobedient to the malevolent aspects of Indra's scheme. From then on, things just happened naturally in this manner. I'm just trying to stop them out of selfishness. Even though I believed I could use the Biju, the rest of the world used them as weapons rather than as a means of promoting peace. He sighed bitterly, "My way of thinking is too naive," just before Menma gave him a bright smile. "Not at all. You were not at all incorrect," he said that, and then the water next to them sloshed and stretched upward, changing into a figure dressed in ancient battle armor and long black hair. "That's right. Not at all. Senju Hashirama. How come you're here?" Menma gasped as the first Hokage looked at the younger man with concern while grinning broadly and placing his hands on his hips. "We've always been in this place." Another voice said, "Our chakra was drawn to you because we were once Ashura's successors as well." As a second bulge of water rose from the surface, it took the shape of a man with red hair that reached his chin and fair skin that was slightly pale. He was dressed in a high-colored black and red cloak, with a gray sash around his waist and a tool bag on his back. "Who are you?" Menma gasped at the sight of another Rinnegan bearer as the man smiled and looked at her, asked Menma. "Nagato Uzumaki is the name," the man said. "You should be a little nicer to other clan members and your senior friend." Menma immediately apologized before recalling that name. "But wait, you're Nagato, the man formerly known as Pain, the leader of the Akatsuki. The Asura path you once had is." "Yes, I am aware of that. I've been observing," Nagato remarked sourly. Another figure emerged from the water, and Menma's heart leapt with joy at the sound of that voice. Minato would be here too, but he's still fighting that prick Indra. It was Naruto, his father. "Daddy, what brought you here?" Menma grinned as Naruto waved to him, a tiny smile lighting up his warm red eyes. "Well, before I got sealed, it wouldn't be wise to not seal a small portion of myself into you, would it? Only the yang half of the yin is with Indra. Since they realized you still had good in your heart and that Indra was in control of you, they secretly sealed some of their power into you, and now that I'm here, you hold the chakra of all 9 Biju. It appears that the long-awaited moment has finally arrived." Old Man Sage smiled, to Menma's amusement and Hagoromo's smile at Naruto. "So, I possess the other Biju's chakra within me? Good. It's accurate, Naruto. True to Gamamaru's prediction. A man who calls out the names of the 9 Biju, his eyes a blazing red. It seems like you've managed to enchant them all into giving you their power." Menma nodded in agreement as Hashirama said, "Go ahead, they will appear when they are called upon." He then started calling out the Biju in order determined by the number of tails. Shukaku, Matabi, Isobyu, Son Goku, Kakuo, Seiken, Chomei, Gyuki, Naruto. Naruto joined the Biju after transforming back into his true form and shedding his human form, and soon all of them were positioned in a circle around the sage, Menma, Hashirama, and Nagato. Menma took a few seconds to realize that some of the Biju had people perched atop their heads. One of them had Saiken on top of his head, and the man's red and black cloak was easily identifiable. "Haihiko!" he exclaimed, receiving salutes from Jinchuriki and the Akatsuki member as he relaxed on top of his Biju, his previous Biju, Isobyu, nearby. "Hey, B. You never imagined it would turn out this way?" asked Naruto, grinning, drawing giggles from B and Yuki. While B agreed with the horrible rap that Yuki moaned at, Yuki remarked, "I never would have guessed. Nevertheless, we had faith that you would overcome, Menma. We're supporting you," B remarked. "What Naguto said about you was accurate." Gaara, perched atop Shukaku, grinned modestly and said, "You are going to transform the world for the better." The giant Tanuki sighed. "You may be like a fox, but Naruto is your father and the Kyuubi." Shukabu let out a sigh as Gaara patted him on the head and said, "Shukaku, please be nice. I'm attempting to convey that I will always be there for you and that I have faith in you. My strength is with you." Matabi responded, "Yeah, we're here for you." Saiken said, "Same here." Isobyu remarked, "I second that." "Here, we have the same sentiments." Son Goku said, "We've got your back, Menma," to which Kakuo nodded. Shomei concluded their statement with, "All of us." From behind Menma, a fresh voice said, "Yes. All of us, indeed." Hagoromo noticed the voice and gave it a deep, proud, caring smile. Menma slowly spun around, gaping in amazement at the man in front of him. It was none other than the actual Ashura Otsutsuki. He opened his mouth to say something, but Ashura shook his head, signaling him to just listen. "Listen, Menma. The secret to all of this is you." Ashura spoke first, then turned to gesture to everyone nearby, saying, "You are here right now to accomplish what I could not, and I'm ashamed that I had to put my burden onto another man's shoulders. However, your friends can assist you in bearing such a heavy load. We can all help." He smiled, and then hundreds of thousands of men and women from all the different clans and villages in the area materialized. They were all descendants of Ashura's will in one way or another. Menma saw the Senju clan, the Uzumaki clan, dozens of Shinbi from all over the ninja world. Some samurai from the Land of Iron mixed in with the group as well, and then he saw a stunning woman with flowing red hair and a kind smile walk towards the front of the Uzumaki clan, and he knew right away who she was, Naruto being the first to speak. He looked down at her from his lofty perch above them all, saying, "Hey Mom." Kushina emerged from the crowd and stood by her son, waving at Menma, who was just now realizing that she was his grandmother. "I find it strange that you enjoy Naruto so much," Kushina said. "I'm still not used to you being like this," to which Naruto gave her a deep laugh. "That's what they all say." Subsequently, multiple other figures approached the sizable assembly, and Menma grinned once more at the recognizable red and black cloaks. Nagato motioned to Byako, Tamura, and Konan, the latter with her head resting on the arm of her childhood lover, Yahiko. The AIM orphans were brought back together once more. "Hey guys. How is Noboru doing? Is that jerk still on the loose?" asked Byako, smiling and snickering at Menma. "Talking about asking how people are doing, how is my brother doing? May I ask Tamura?" Menma nodded to both shinobi, saying, "He's fine, and so is Noboru." As Tobirama Senju, the second Hokage, showed up, Hashirama's brother waved a little to him, and he waved back. Then the sage was even more surprised to see someone he had assumed he would never see again. The man wearing the same exact cloak that he had worn, with a high collar, 6 red magatama across the chest, and horn-like protrusions that resembled those of Hagoromo. He also had no eyebrows, long, light-colored hair that was combed to the left, a single lock that hung from the right side of his face, and, most intriguing of all, featureless white eyes that were characteristic of the Byakugan. "Hamura." Hagoromo stammered a little before his own brother came up to him and hugged him tightly. The reunion of the two brothers brought tears to the old sage's eyes as he remembered the sacrifice he made to defeat the Jubi. As Hamura pulled away from Hagoromo, the latter was looking at him bewildered. "Hey little brother, it's good to see you too," Hamura said. "How are you doing in this place?" Hagoromo asked. "I thought the dead demon-consuming seal consumed your soul forever," to which Homura laughed a little. "Hundreds of years prior to now. This is becoming too much," cried Hagoromo, just before the shockwave from the Jubi's fist hitting the ground carried him away. He cringed at its piercing shriek, making his ears ring, and his brother ran to him, joining him as they faced the Jubi. Himura's chin was dripping blood, and one of his eyes was bleeding. The two brothers had been struck and bruised all over their bodies. Hamura was forced to make a tough choice because they could no longer afford to prolong their battle with the titanic beast. Hagoromo, we're never gonna beat this thing unless we use that technique you developed for an occasion such as this. That one? I'll kill myself if I try to do it while it's still at maximum power. Gaboromo looked at his brother and said. I am aware. Hamura said, I'll use my 8 trigrams sacrificial critical strike to weaken the beast because of this. He then turned on his Byakugan and started examining the Jubi's vulnerabilities. No, you are unable to. You'll die from it. With its legs badly injured by the two brothers, the Jubi roared once more and started to slowly pull itself to them, pleading with Hagoromo. With a sigh, Hamura bowed his head and considered his last few remarks for a short while. Hagoromo, the world won't be able to fight this monstrosity if we don't defeat it. I must complete this task, Hamura uttered, before dropping his sword and assuming a fighting stance, his gaze fixed on the approaching Jubi. You use your jutsu to seal it into your body after I seriously hurt it, do you understand? He said, nodding to Hagoromo, who was able to create hand seals with both hands by letting his double-headed Shikuho hover behind him. Ready. With a smile, Hamura said, and Hagoromo, I'm glad I was your brother. He then wiped away some tears, focused his chakra into his hands, and readied his jutsu. He leapt into the air, his entire body covered in light green chakra, using his Byakugan to lock onto a section of the Jubi near its heart. Gisei Karitikaru Hake. He drove straight through the Jubi's hard exterior and pierced its heart, his body collapsing from the excessive release of his chakra to form a human dagger. His heart stopped beating instantly. With an intense sense of sadness, Hagoromo said, Goodbye, brother, wiping the tears of grief from his eyes and fixing his gaze on the wailing Jubi. Pure white chakra chains shot out from his chest and circled around the enormous bulk of the Jubi, restraining it despite the large beast's vain attempts to break free. He pressed his palms together and bellowed with all his might. Seal! Hagoromo cried out, a brilliant light emanating from his chest as the Jubi drew him in and sealed him, turning him into the first Jinchuriki. With a bent back, he coughed violently, the heavy weight of the Jubi inside him draining him to the point where he was bleeding from the mouth and nose. He wheezed and said, its chakra is unimaginable, then abruptly remembered his brother. Hamura! He shouted, his voice resonating over the desolate wasteland as he jumped from little hill to hill, trying to find his brother. When he reached a sizable crater, he came to a complete stop, with his brother's body lying in the middle. His head in his hands, he stared at the emptiness in his pale eyes, the strong life force that he once possessed. Ripped away from him, he slid down the face of the crater and ran over to his brother's corpse, falling to his knees as sorrow overtook his entire being, reducing him to tears that flowed down his face. He was sobbing uncontrollably as he held his dead brother close and expressed his gratitude for helping him defeat the Jubi, but he was also saddened that he had to give his life in order to do so. Today, when Hamura gestured to Menma and spoke again, Hagoromo waved away the memory. That chakra of his took me back, and it made me think of you, little brother. Menma was shocked to see the sage's brother and learn that the sage was actually the younger brother. I know what's been going on too. I'm sorry about Indra. Hamura apologized before turning to face Menma while he stood by his brother. You see, despite the fact that we come from various eras, towns, clans, and families, we are all connected to one another and perceive one another as one. In fact, our chakras are the same for everyone. That is the origin of Ninshu. As I mentioned before, the key to all of this is you, Menma. Ashura stepped back and cast a sidelong glance at Hashirama. You alone, with all of our help, can put a stop to Indra once and for all, he said. What name did you go by? The item that each and every person possesses. The first Hokage said, the will of fire. Ashura nodded, and then all of a sudden his body was covered in a bright orange chakra that appeared to be a soft, flickering flame. His clothing was covered in intricate black symbols, and his body was covered in black lines and marks. Each hand had a spiraling circle. With a small smile and a bow, he said, Menma Uzumaki, I hereby bestow upon you my will of fire. Menma, unable to control his emotions, watched in dismay as, one by one, Hashirama and Ashura developed the same chakra cloak. The Biju then began to do the same, and so on, in sequential order, until Naruto finished and looked down at his son with pride. Menma then wiped tears from his eyes at the show. Menma, do you recall what I told you when you were first born? That day has finally arrived, declared Naruto, filled with immense pride in his son, before reverting to his human form and embracing him while Hamura and Hagoromo waited for him to finish. The child of prophecy's time has come to change the world, declared Hagoromo, turning to face Menma with a serious expression that belied his words. Menma, how would you like to proceed? When this fight is done, what would you look for? He asked. I want to hear your answer, honestly and sincerely. Naruto smiled a little and waited for Menma, who was giving his response some serious thought. Yes, I do think I look a lot like Ashura, but I'm not at all like him. There are many things I still don't understand, and occasionally I can be cocky and ignorant, he said, his thoughts returning to Amari as her smile brought a smile to his face. But I know what it is for someone to be my friend, a family member, and someone whom I care about. And I want to protect them, that's all, he said. He turned, letting his gaze drift over the mass of people, focusing on Ashura for a moment before moving on, finally resting on the sage and his brother once more, and then he remembered his mother and the picture of his father lying in front of him, chilling him to the bone as Hagoromo waited for him to finish. I want to use everything I have, even my own life, to safeguard everything that is important to me so they can continue to live and see their friends and family for many more years to come. In order for everyone to understand one another, I want to eradicate all of the hatred that currently exists in the world and unite everyone. I want to do that, Menma declared with assurance, a smile on his face and a sparkle in his eye. So, is that your response? Menma gave a single nod to indicate that he was certain of his response to Hagoromo's question. Hagoromo answered with a very somber remark. The last time this happened, my brother and I had to fight the devil head on because my mother had brought it upon us. My brother had to give his life to save mine, something I still can't forgive myself for. I trusted Indra with everything, and he turned against Ashura, so there was nothing I could do. That was the start of this whole disaster. Menma nodded once more before Hagoromo continued. I am hoping that if I carry this out, you won't break your word and give this power, allowing the world and its people to finally understand who they really are. I promise. Excellent. Hagoromo smiled and revealed a long, kept secret that surprised Menma, Kushina, Naruto, and everyone else who knew them. The revelation was that he was related to the sage's son, meaning Menma was a descendant of the sage himself. Give me your hands, as now to you, Ashura's successor and blood relative. You are the only one with power over me, so you can become my heir, and from now on, Menma Uzumaki, it's entirely up to you what you do and what transpires, Hagoromo declared, and Menma let out a sigh. I wasn't really good at coping with peace, but this time, I think I'm just fine with it, he said, raising their hands to greet the others and putting smiles on the faces of Nagato, Hashirama, Biju, Akatsuki members, and most importantly, his father Naruto. Menma felt a surge of chakra enter him as soon as they clasped hands, and the barren world of Limbo gradually brightened until at last, he woke up. Living. The clouds of dust that had covered the whole area parted, revealing a horrific scene. Indra was leaning against an overturned boulder, his blood splattered all over its face, his lower thigh and left side completely destroyed, leaving only burned and bleeding flesh, half of his face covered in burnt flesh and blood, and his only functional eye half open. But Suzaku was on the ground, not a breath escaping his lungs, his body scorched and pitch black, the brilliant red veins fading as the life drained from him, the extraordinary life force of the Uzumaki clan failing to save him from certain death this time, his shin gone, his foot turning to ash in an instant. I believed I was lost forever, you damned madman. As another black sphere formed in the air next to his head, Indra laughed as he started to heal himself gradually. That was one that was really up to the stars to decide. I will kill you myself as a thank you for entertaining me, before you burn to ashes. The black ball shot outward toward Suzaku's dying form, too far away for the Akatsuki members to stop it in time, Indra uttered. All eyes turned to Menma, who had created the chakra blast, and saw that he was surrounded by dark red demonic chakra as he began to transform into his version 2 state. Suddenly, a devastating roar shook the entire crater, a shockwave pushing away all of the dust in the area while a wave of chakra exploded outward across its entirety, the black orb being vaporized when touched by the chakra. Oh, he's conscious? As his other eye eventually healed and became open, Indra questioned as his side began to regenerate and his left arm began to grow again. As soon as Menma's dark red chakra began to lighten and turn bright yellow and orange, turning from a raging torrent to a gentle flame, Genkaku began to worry about Menma's unstable and hostile emotions and thoughts in this state with the others. Menma took a deep breath as his hair grew slightly longer and two tufts turned into horn, like projections, resembling the protrusions on Hagoromo's forehead. Various black seals appeared on his clothing now, which included a waist-length yellow, orange coat with sex yellow magatama around the high collar and a yellow circle where his previous seal was, a black bodysuit that covered his torso and ended just above his new sandals, Naruto's new cloak after gaining the sage's power in the manga. Hagoromo's seal, which was composed of the Rinnegan-like symbol and the 9 magatama arranged in 3 rows beneath it, was on the back of his coat. The slashed aim symbol on his headband was erased and replaced with a Rinnegan symbol similar to the one Hagoromo had on his forehead. His whisker marks also grew thicker and more block-like. The same black spheres that Indra had amassed since turning into the Jubi's Jinchuriki formed around him, and he used one of them quickly to shape it into a two-headed shakuho that resembled Hagoromo's, floating behind him at shoulder height while the other black spheres levitated in a ring overhead. How is the Gudadama in his possession? Unlike me, he is not the Jinchuriki of the Jubi. What transpired during his coma? As he stood up from the floor, Indra wondered aloud and saw that Menma had his eyes closed, hiding something behind them. Then he started to approach Suzaku, approaching him without opening his eyes and navigating only with his other senses, and he knelt to touch the area above Suzaku's heart with the palm of his hand, a seal forming on the black skin that started to glow a soft yellow color. This intrigued Indra even more when he noticed Suzaku's tenketsu at his heart stabilize, indicating that he was going to survive. Suzaku started to breathe deeply and his skin started to lighten, revealing new life, while Menma also fixed the parts of his body that were deteriorating and returned them to normal. Even after using the Phoenix Fire Raging Wings, he managed to stabilize Suzaku. Menma, what power have you acquired? As Noboru stared at him in shock, Genkaku thought to himself in wonder. What took place with you? You look fierce as hell. Menma smiled as he got up, carefully lifted Suzaku, carried him over to them, and then slowly lowered himself back to the ground next to Genkaku, who promptly started tending to him. As he turned back to face Indra, the man gave him a suspicious look and he said, I was visited by someone that saved me from my own sorrow. Who was it? Menma smirked before saying his visitor's name, making sure to say it loudly enough for Indra to hear, and asked, Arashi? His name was Hagoromo Otsutsuki, otherwise known as the Sage of Six Paths. That's how he came to possess this new ability. He must have found a means to get in touch with my father so he could give him more chakra. However, why is he covering his eyes? Is he currently blind? My eyes narrowed at Menma, who kept grinning as he took his hand and put it on his stomach, thought Indra. Menma proudly smiled at his family tree and said, I also found out that I'm the inheritor of his son's chakra and will, Indra's brother, Ashura. And that I'm actually related to him. Noboru's mouth fell open. I met Dad too, he remarked as Akayuri approached him and raised her gaze to him, beaming with happiness. Menma said, now. With the chakra of so many people behind me, including the Biju and Dad, I feel like I can change everything. Just before he opened his eyes and gave her a tight hug, Indra became ill at this display of affection. She said softly, go. I know you can win. Menma nodded and grinned once more as he turned to face Indra, shocking him with his newfound power and increased chakra. Having awakened the powerful dojutsu within him, it was the Rinnegan, a combination of his chakra, Ashura's chakra, and Indra's chakra, inherited from Hagoromo's brother and the sage himself. Indra Otsutsuki, I will vanquish you with these eyes, Menma exclaimed, meeting Indra's intense frown as they locked eyes. He's formed the Rinnegan and gained the chakra of my father, excellent. This is going to be the last fight. My power versus your power. Let's determine once and for all who is better. Menma kept glaring at him as he prepared for the impending fight, but Indra declared as he formed a single seal.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.